In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a scream shatters the dawn at Gossington Hall. A young woman, glamorous and strangled, lies dead in Colonel Bantry's library, stranger in a place she doesn't belong. Enter Miss Jane Marple, whose gentle demeanor hides a razor-sharp mind. As whispers swirl around a seaside hotel, a wealthy widower's fortune and a rebellious film technician. A second body burnt beyond recognition turns up in a quarry. Dressed to deceive. Was it jealousy, greed, or a darker secret? With time running out, Miss Marple unravels a web of lies where no one is who they seem, and the truth is as deadly as the crime. Chapter 1. The shock at Gossington Hall. The first light of dawn crept through the heavy drapes of Gossington Hall, casting pale fingers across the polished oak floors. The house, a sturdy Georgian relic nestled in the heart of St. Mary Mead, stood, silent save for the distant clink of china from the kitchen, where Mrs. Brooks, the cook, prepared breakfast. Colonel Arthur Bantry, retired and fond of routine, was still abed, dreaming of his days in India. His wife, Dolly, stirred beside him, her mind already drifting to the day's tasks bridge at the vicarage, perhaps, or a visit to the Women's Institute. It was a morning like any other, until it wasn't. At 7 o'clock, precisely, Mary, the housemaid, slipped into the library to draw back the curtains. The room, with its leather-bound books and lingering scent of cigar smoke, was Colonel Bantry's sanctum, rarely disturbed before noon. Mary, a slight girl with a nervous disposition, moved briskly, eager to finish her duties. She reached for the velvet curtains, then froze. A gasp escaped her lips, followed by a scream that tore through the house like a gunshot. On the hearthrug, sprawled in a grotesque parody of repose, lay a young woman, her platinum blonde hair fanned out like a halo, clashing with the garish pink satin of her evening gown. Her painted lips were parted, her eyes glassy, fixed on the chandelier above. A thin line of bruises circled her throat, stark against her pale skin. Footsteps pounded down the staircase. Colonel Bantry, clad in a dressing gown and slippers, burst into the room, his moustache quivering with alarm. What the devil? His words died as he saw the body. Dolly, close behind, clutched her shawl, her practical nature warring with shock. "Arthur, don't touch her," she said sharply, her voice steady despite the pallor of her cheeks. "Mary, fetch Dr. Haydock at once, and telephone the police." Mary, trembling, fled the room, her sobs echoing down the hall. By 8. The library was a hive of activity. Dr. Haydock, a grizzled man with a gentle manner, knelt beside the body, his fingers probing with clinical precision. "Strangled," he murmured, adjusting his spectacles. "Dead some hours, I'd say since midnight, perhaps. Rigours just setting in." Inspector Slack, summoned from Much Benham, arrived shortly after, his sharp eyes scanning the room. A lean, impatient man, Slack had little tolerance for the leisurely pace of village life. He barked orders to his constable, who began dusting for fingerprints, while Colonel Bantry hovered, muttering about the disgrace to his home. "Who is she?" Slack demanded, glaring at the Bantrys as if they might be hiding the answer. Dolly shook her head. "I've never seen her before. She's not from St. Mary Mead, I'd wager. The dressed's not village wear. The gown, cheap and flashy, spoke of dance halls or seaside resorts, not the quiet lanes of St. Mary Mead." The French windows, slightly ajar, caught Slack's attention. "Entry point, likely," he said, striding over. Yet the dew-soaked lawn beyond showed no footprints, no sign of disturbance. He frowned, his mind already wrestling with the contradiction. Dolly, retreating to the drawing room, sent a note to her old friend, Miss Jane Marple, whose cottage lay just beyond the vicarage. If anyone could make sense of this horror, it was Jane, with her unassuming air and uncanny insight into the darker corners of human nature. By 9, Miss Marple arrived, her black lace mittens and neat straw hat belying the sharpness of her pale blue eyes. She settled into a chintz armchair, a cup of tea in hand, and listened as Dolly recounted the morning's events. A young woman, strangled in Arthur's library, Dolly said, her voice low. It's monstrous, Jane, and so peculiar. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her knitting a constant companion. Peculiar indeed, she said, her tone mild but her gaze distant, as if seeing something beyond the room. A girl like that, in a place like this. It's not just the crime, Dolly, it's the setting. Why Gossington Hall? Why the library? She paused, her fingers still. There's a pattern here, though we can't see it yet. Like a piece of lace, all loops and knots, but it makes sense if you know the design. Colonel Bantry, and restless, poked his head in, slacks turning the place upside down. Says she might be a dancer from Dannymouth. Ruby something or other. Confounded. Dolly, what's a dancer doing in my library? Miss Marple's eyes flickered with interest, but she said nothing, only sipped her tea. Outside, the mist had lifted, revealing the orderly lawns of Gossington Hall. But within, a shadow had fallen, and Miss Marple knew it would take all her quiet cunning to banish it. Chapter 2. The Girl in the Gown. The sun had burned away the morning mist by the time Inspector Slack's police car rattled down the drive of Gossington Hall, leaving behind a household still reeling from the discovery in the library. Colonel Bantry, his face a mask of indignation, retreated to his study, muttering about the press and the ruin of his reputation. Dolly Bantry, ever the pragmatist, poured herself a second cup of tea in the drawing-room, her mind churning. Miss Jane Marple, seated opposite, knitted with mechanical precision, her pale blue eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the chintz curtains. The scream of the housemaid Mary still echoed in Dolly's ears, but it was Miss Marple's quiet observation, a girl like that, in a place like this, that gnawed at her. Dolly, my dear, Miss Marple said at last, her voice soft as the rustle of her knitting, we must go to Dannymouth. This girl Ruby was it. She's from the Majestic Hotel, or so Inspector Slack believes. We shan't get answers sitting here. Dolly, who had been contemplating a telephone call to the vicar's wife to quell village gossip, brightened at the prospect of action. You're right, Jane. Let's see what this hotel is about. Arthur can manage the reporters. Poor dear. She rang for the car, and within the hour, the Bantrys' elderly Daimler was winding through the lanes toward the coast, Miss Marple, straw hat bobbing beside Dolly's cloche. The Majestic Hotel loomed over Dannymouth's promenade like a dowager duchess, its white stucco facade gleaming in the midday sun. Its grandeur, though slightly faded, spoke of an era when seaside holidays were the preserve of the wealthy. The lobby bustled with porters, bellboys, and guests, some in tennis whites, others in furs, despite the June warmth. A faint strain of orchestra music drifted from the ballroom, mingling with the clink of teacups and the murmur of conversation. Dolly, who had visited the Majestic for charity bazaars, led the way to the reception desk, where a sleek young man with pommaded hair greeted them. Mrs. Bantry, how delightful, he said, his smile professional but strained, and he glanced at Miss Marple, whose unassuming appearance black lace mittens, Sensible shoes seemed to puzzle him. Miss Marple, a friend, Dolly said briskly. We're here about the unfortunate business with Ruby Keene. The clerk's smile faltered. Of course, Mr. Prescott, the manager, is expecting you. This way, please. They were ushered into a mahogany-panelled office where Mr. Prescott, a portly man with a walrus mustache, rose to greet them. His florid face betrayed anxiety, though his manner was polished. Mrs. Bantry, a terrible shock, this, he said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. Ruby Keene, one of our dancers, found. Well, you know where. The police have been here since dawn. A dreadful blow to the hotel's reputation. Miss Marple, settling into a chair, noted the tremor in his voice. Reputation is a fragile thing, Mr. Prescott, she said mildly. But tell us about Ruby. Who was she? Prescott hesitated, then launched into a rehearsed account. Ruby Keene, 18, had been employed at the Majestic for 3 months as a professional dancer, performing in the nightly entertainments. She was popular, he said, with a bright smile and a flair for the foxtrot. Her cousin, Josie Turner, worked as a bridge hostess, arranging card games for the guests. Ruby had last been seen at midnight, after her solo dance in the ballroom. She had complained of a headache and retired, or so everyone thought. Her bed, however, was unslept in, and her room empty. A mystery, Prescott concluded, spreading. His hands, she vanished, only 2, turn up where she did. Dolly frowned, vanished, from a hotel full of people. Surely someone saw her leave. Prescott shook his head. The night porter saw her enter the lift, but no one saw her exit the hotel. The staff are in a state, and the guests, well, you can imagine the gossip. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a rhythmic counterpoint to the manager's agitation. And this cousin, Josie Turner, she said, what is she like? Prescott brightened slightly. Josie, a steady girl, very capable. She's been with us 2 years. Devoted to Ruby, naturally. She's with the police now, poor thing. Identifying the body. At that moment, the door opened and a woman entered, escorted by a uniformed constable. Josie Turner was in her late 20s, tall and angular, with dark hair pinned severely under a felt hat. Her face, though pale, was composed, her brown eyes red-rimmed but dry. She wore a plain navy dress, its simplicity at odds with the hotel's opulence. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, Prescott said, rising. This is Miss Turner. Josie inclined her head, her gaze flickering over the 2 women. I'm sorry to meet under such circumstances, she said, her voice low and controlled. Ruby, it's unthinkable. Dolly, ever direct, leaned forward. Miss Turner, we're trying to understand what happened. Ruby was found in our library, miles from here. Can you tell us anything about her last hours? Josie sank into a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I wish I could. Ruby danced last night, her usual performance. She was splendid, as always. The guests adored her. Afterward, she joined Mr. Jefferson's table for supper. He's a regular, a kind old gentleman who took a fancy to her. At midnight, she said she felt unwell and went to her room. I thought she was resting. I never imagined. Her voice broke, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, studied Josie's face. Mr. Jefferson, she said gently. Who is he? Josie hesitated, then answered, Conway Jefferson, a widower. He's wealthy, stays here every summer. He's crippled, uses a wheelchair, but he's lively, full of stories. Ruby liked him. He was talking about helping her, perhaps a stage career in London. Prescott nodded. Mr. Jefferson's a valued guest. His son-in-law are with him, Mark Gaskell and Adelaide Jefferson. They're all shaken by this. And Ruby herself, Miss Marple continued, her tone deceptively mild. Was she happy here? Any troubles? Young men, perhaps? Josie's lips tightened. Ruby was ambitious. She wanted more than Danamoth, more than dancing in a hotel. She had admirers, of course guests, sometimes staff. There was a young man, Basil Blake, who lives near St. Mary Mead. He works in films, I think. Ruby mentioned him once or twice, but I didn't think it serious. Her words were careful, measured, as if she were weighing each one. Miss Marple noted the slight flush on Josie's cheeks, the way her fingers twisted the handkerchief. Dolly, less patient, pressed on. This Basil Blake, did Ruby see him yesterday? Josie shook her head. Not that I know. She was busy with her performance. Then with Mr. Jefferson. I didn't see her leave the ballroom, but she was. Well, she could be impulsive. If she slipped out, she didn't tell me. The constable, standing by the door, cleared his throat, signaling that Josie was needed elsewhere. She rose, her movements stiff. I must go. The police have more questions. If you'll excuse me. She left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Pressed Cat, mopping his brow again, offered to show them Ruby's room. They followed him through the hotel's labyrinthine passages to a modest chamber on the 3rd floor, reserved for staff. The room was tidy, almost impersonal, with a narrow bed, a chipped wardrobe, and a small dressing table. Ruby's dance, costume spangled and feather-trimmed, hung in the wardrobe, their brightness jarring against the drab walls. On the dressing table sat a few cosmetics, a cheap novel, and a photograph of Ruby and Josie, arms linked, smiling. On a pier, Miss Marple lingered over the photograph, her expression unreadable. They were close, then, she murmured. Dotty opened the wardrobe, inspecting the costumes. These are professional, but not expensive. She was talented, but not rich. Why would someone kill her? Prescott, hovering nervously, ventured, perhaps a jealous lover, or a robbery gone wrong. Her purse was missing, though she had little to steal. Miss Marple, examining the dressing table, paused at a small jewelry box. Inside was a single item, sapphire bracelet, its stones glinting in the sunlight. This, she said softly, is not cheap. A gift, perhaps. Prescott blinked. I didn't know she had such a thing. She never wore it in public. They left the room, Miss Marple's mind turning over the bracelet, the photograph, Josie's guarded answers. In the lobby, they encountered Inspector Slack, his face thunderous. Mrs. Bantry, he said curtly, I've spoken to Josie Turner. She's distraught, but her story holds for now. We're checking on this Basil Blake. Lives in a cottage near you, doesn't he? A troublemaker, from what I hear. Dolly bristled. He's unconventional, Inspector, but that's no crime. Slack grunted. We'll see. I'm heading to his place now. The French windows at Gossington were unlatched, but no footprints outside. Someone carried that girl in, and I mean to find out who. As Slack strode off, Dolly turned to Miss Marple. Basil Blake. He's a bit wild parties, fast cars but murder. I can't see it. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. People surprise us, Dolly. But it's not just who carried her. It's why Gossington Hall? Why not a ditch or the sea? There's a purpose here, a message. They stepped onto the promenade, the salt breeze sharp against their faces. The Majestic's facade gleamed behind them, but its elegance hid secrets. Miss Marple was certain. Back in the Daimler, Dolly sighed. Josie seemed genuine, but she's hiding something. And that bracelet Ruby couldn't afford it. A lover or Mr. Jefferson? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Perhaps. But gifts come with strings, Dolly, and strings can tangle. As the car wound back toward St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple gazed out at the rolling hills, her mind weaving a pattern from the morning's threads, Ruby's ambition, Josie's restraint, the sapphire's gleam. The girl in the gown was more than a victim. She was a puzzle, and Miss Marple knew the pieces were only beginning to fall into place. Chapter 3. The Bantry Connection. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawns of Gossington Hall as the Daimler crunched to a halt on the gravel drive. Dolly Bantry, her cloche hat slightly askew from the sea breeze of Dannymoth, stepped out, her mind still buzzing with the morning's revelations at the majestic hotel. Miss Jane Marple followed, her straw hat firmly pinned, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. The weight of Ruby Keene's death hung over them, not just for its horror, but for its inexplicable tether to the Bantrys' home. Why their library? Why their hearthrug? The question gnawed at Dolly, and she sensed it preoccupied Miss Marple too. Though the older woman's serene expression gave little away, inside, the hall was quieter now, the police having retreated to pursue their inquiries. Colonel Bantry stood in the drawing room, staring moodily out the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, despite the early hour. His usually ruddy face was drawn, his moustache drooping. "Dolly," he said, turning, "this is a damned nightmare. The village is alive, with talk reporters sniffing about, Mrs. Price at the post office spreading tales. And that girl, in our house. It's as if we're cursed." Dolly, shedding her coat, crossed to his side. "Nonsense, Arthur. It's a shock, but we'll get to the bottom of it. Jane's here, and she's already got ideas. Haven't you, Jane?" Miss Marple, settling into an armchair with her knitting, smiled faintly. "Ideas, perhaps, but nothing clear yet, Dolly. A crime like this is like a tangled skein of wool, one must find the end before it unravels." She paused, her needles clicking softly. "Colonel Bantry, have you any notion, however slight, why this girl might have been brought here? Any connection to Gossington Hall?" Arthur snorted, setting his glass down with a clink. "Connection? None. I never heard of Ruby Keene until this morning. A dancer from Dannymoth, Slack says. What business has she with us?" "It's madness." Dolly frowned, her practical mind grappling with the anomaly. "It is odd, Jane. We're not grand like the Jeffersons at the Majestic, nor mixed up with film people like Basil Blake. We're just us, quiet folk, minding our own business." Miss Marple's eyes, pale and piercing, flickered with interest. "Quiet, yes, but known, Dolly. Gossington Hall is a landmark in St. Mary Mead. To place a body here is to make a statement. The question is, to whom?" Her words hung in the air, and Dolly felt a shiver, as if the library's shadow had crept into the room, determined to act. Dolly proposed they visit the Majestic again, this time to meet Conway Jefferson and his family, whose names had surfaced in Josie Turner's account. If Ruby was close to this Jefferson fellow, Dolly said, he might know something about her, or why she ended up here. Miss Marple nodded a capital idea. "And I should like to see this Basil Blake's cottage, too. He's a thread in this pattern, I'm sure of it." Colonel Bantry, reluctant to be left alone with his thoughts, agreed to drive them, grumbling about meddling in police business, but secretly relieved for the distraction. The Majestic Hotel when they arrived, was a different creature in the late afternoon. The lobby hummed with guests preparing for the evening's entertainment's dinner, dancing, perhaps a game of bridge. The orchestra rehearsed in the ballroom, strains of a waltz floating through the air. Mr. Prescott, the manager, greeted them with a weary politeness, his mustache twitching as he ushered them to a private salon. "Mr. Jefferson is expecting you," he said, his voice low. "He's taken this business with Ruby very hard. A delicate man, you understand, despite his spirit." Conway Jefferson awaited them in a high-backed wheelchair, his thin frame swathed in a cashmere blanket, his face, lined but handsome, lit with a spark of vitality as he extended a hand. "Mrs. Bantry, Colonel, and Miss Marple, is it? A pleasure, though I wish it were under happier circumstances." His voice was warm, cultured, with a hint of wariness. Beside him stood a man and a woman, Mark Gaskell, his son-in-law, and Adelaide Jefferson, his daughter-in-law. Mark, in his 30s, was lean and charming, with slick, dark hair and a restless energy. His tailored suit spoke of money, but his eyes darted nervously. Adelaide, fair and reserved, wore a dove-grey dress, her expression one of quiet endurance. Both murmured greetings, their unease palpable. Dolly, never one for preamble, plunged in. "Mr. Jefferson, we're trying to understand why Ruby Keene was found in our home. We heard you were fond of her. Can you tell us about her?" Conway's face softened, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "Ruby was a delight," he said. "Bright, full of life. She reminded me of my daughter, Rosamond, lost years ago. Ruby danced like a dream's such grace. I'd watch her in the ballroom, and it was as if time turned back. I planned to help her. You know, perhaps a stage career or schooling. She deserved more than this place." Mark Gaskell shifted, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Conway was quite taken with her," he said, his tone light but edged. "She had a way of drawing people in. Not everyone approved, of course." Adelaide glanced at him sharply, then spoke, her voice low. "Ruby was kind to Conway. She made him laugh. But she was young, impulsive. I worried she might attract the wrong sort." Miss Marple, knitting silently, noted the undercurrent in their words. "The wrong sort," she prompted gently. Adelaide hesitated. "Oh, you know men, admirers." She was noticed, and not always for the right reasons. Colonel Bantry, who had been silent, cleared his throat. "This Basil Blake, for instance. We hear Ruby knew him. Lives near us, in a cottage by the lane. A film fellow, bit of a bounder." Conway's brow furrowed. "Basil Blake. Ruby mentioned him once a friend," she said. "I didn't think much of it. She was discreet about her personal life." Mark snorted softly. "Discreet. She was a flirt, Conway. You know that. Blake's the type to cause trouble. I saw him here once, hanging about the terrace." Adelaide's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Miss Marple's needles paused. "Mr. Jefferson, did Ruby ever speak of Gossington Hall or St. Mary Mead?" Conway shook his head. "Never. She talked of London, of fame. Village life wouldn't have interested her." He paused, his eyes distant. "I can't fathom why she was taken to your home. It's cruel, senseless." Dolly, sensing his distress, changed tack. "And Josie Turner, her cousin, how did they get along?" Conway brightened slightly. "Josie, a fine woman, very capable. She looked after Ruby, kept her in line. Josie's been a godsend to me. Two plays bridge, keeps me company. She's heartbroken, naturally." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Josie Turner herself, her navy dress unchanged from the morning, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Jefferson, you wanted me," she said, then noticed the Bantrys and Miss Marple. "Oh, I didn't realize Mrs. Bantry, Colonel, Miss Marple." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor. Conway gestured her forward. "Josie, these good people are asking about Ruby. Tell them what you told me about her last evening." Josie nodded, repeating her earlier account: Ruby's dance, her supper with Conway's party, her headache, her retreat to her room. "I thought she was safe," Josie added, her voice catching. "I should have checked on her, Miss Marple." Gaze lingered on Josie's hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "Miss Turner," she said softly, "did Ruby seem herself that night? No worries, no fears?" Josie's eyes flickered. She was tired, perhaps. The dancing, the late hours wore on her, but she didn't say anything unusual. Dolly, less subtle, pressed further. "And this sapphire bracelet we found in her room, you know where it came from?" Josie's lips parted, then closed. "A bracelet, she had admirers, as I said. Perhaps a gift. She didn't show it to me." The interview ended soon. After, with Conway promising to assist the police and Josie excusing herself to attend to hotel duties. As the Bantrys and Miss Marple left the salon, Dolly whispered, "Josie's not telling us everything. Did you see her hands? She's nervous." Miss Marple nodded. "Nervous, yes, but controlled. She's protecting something or someone." Colonel Bantry, trailing behind, muttered, "All this talk of bracelets and dancers. What's it got to do with our library? I say, it's Blake. He's the link." Determined to pursue this lead, they drove to Basil Blake's cottage, a low, modern affair tucked behind a hedge near St. Mary Mead's outskirts. Its bright red door and unkempt garden stood out against the village's tidy cottages, earning it the disapproval of neighbors like Mrs. Price. Basil, lounging on the porch in a garish silk shirt, eyed their arrival with a mix of amusement and wariness. "Colonel Bantry, Mrs. Bantry," he drawled, rising, "and a friend. To what do I owe the visit? Not another complaint about my gramophone, I hope." Dolly, undeterred by his flippancy, introduced Miss Marple and cut to the chase. "Mr. Blake, we're here about Ruby Keene. She was found dead in our library this morning. We know you knew her." Basil's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing. "Ruby dead. Good God, that's awful." He ran a hand through his tousled hair, his nonchalance crumbling. "Yes, I knew her. Met her at the Majestic a few times. We danced, had a laugh. She was a sweet kid, ambitious, but I hadn't seen her in weeks." Colonel Bantry, his patience thin, snapped, "Don't play the innocent. Blake, you were seen with her in Danamoth, and now she's dead in my house. What's your game?" Basil's jaw tightened. "No game, Colonel. I liked Ruby, but we weren't close. Last night, I was here, alone, working on a script. Ask my girl, Dinah Leashy. Tell you I'm no killer." Miss Marple, who had been silent, spoke gently. "Mr. Blake, did Ruby ever mention Gossington Hall, or anyone connected to it?" Basil shook his head. "Never. She talked about London, the stage. Your place wouldn't have been on her radar." As they left, Dolly glanced back at the cottage. "He's lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. Did you see his eyes? He's scared." Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm in the car. "Scared, yes, but of what? Guilt or something else. And still, we come back to your home, Dolly. The library is the key, I'm sure of it. They drove back to Gossington Hall. In silence, the weight of unanswered questions pressing down. The village of St. Mary Mead, with its neat gardens and gossiping inhabitants, seemed unchanged. Yet Miss Marple knew a darkness had settled, one that linked the Bantrys' quiet life to a dancer's violent end. The pattern was forming, thread by thread, and she would not rest until it was complete. Chapter 4. The shadow of Basil Blake the twilight had deepened over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in hues of violet and gold as the Bantrys' Daimler rolled back toward Gossington Hall. The day's excursions to the majestic hotel and Basil Blake's garish cottage had left Dolly Bantry restless, her mind a whirl of half-formed suspicions. Colonel Bantry, gripping the steering wheel, muttered about that insolent pup Blake and the affront to his home's sanctity. Miss Jane Marple in the back seat, knitted with her usual calm, her pale blue eyes reflecting the fading light. Yet beneath her placid exterior, her thoughts churned, piecing together the fragments of Ruby Keane's life and death. The girl's body in the library was no random act, she was certain. It was a deliberate stroke in a larger design, and Basil Blake, with his evasive charm, was a figure in that pattern at Gossington Hall. The household had settled into an uneasy quiet. The police had left, their fingerprint powders and measuring tapes stowed. But the library remained sealed, its door a silent rebuke. Over a late supper of cold ham and salad, Dolly recounted their findings to Colonel Bantry, who had stayed behind during the cottage visit. Basil Blake admits he knew Ruby, she said, spearing a tomato with unnecessary force. But he claims he was home alone last night, scribbling some film nonsense. No alibi, no witnesses. And his man at Jane, didn't you find him slippery? Mr. Marple, sipping her tea, nodded thoughtfully. Slippery, yes, Dolly, but not necessarily guilty. Mr. Blake is hiding something, but it may not be murder. His fear was genuine, though whether of the police or something else, I cannot yet say. Colonel Bantry snorted, his moustache bristling. Fear, the fellow's a cad. Living in that eyesore of a cottage, throwing parties till all hours. If he's mixed up with this girl's death, I'll have his hide. Dolly patted his arm. Now, Arthur, let's not leap to conclusions. Jane, what's our next step? We can't let Slack bully Basil into a confession if he's innocent. Miss Marple set down her cup, her needles pausing. We must learn more about Ruby's movements. Dolly, how did she travel from Dannymoth to Gossington Hall? The timing is peculiar. Dr. Haydock said she died near midnight, yet she was found here at 7. No car tracks, no footprints. Someone brought her, and Basil Blake's cottage is conveniently close. She paused, her gaze distant. Tomorrow, I should like to speak to this Dinah Lee, his friend. And we must return to the majestic Mr. Jefferson's fondness for Ruby and Josie Turner's role in it bears closer scrutiny. The next morning dawned bright, the air crisp with the promise of summer. After breakfast, Dolly and Miss Marple set out for Basil Blake's cottage, leaving Colonel Bantry to fend off a persistent reporter from the Much Benham Gazette. The cottage, with its red door and overgrown roses, looked less defiant in the daylight, though its modern angles still clashed with the village's timeless charm. As they approached, a young woman emerged, her auburn hair catching the sun. She wore a green dress that was both stylish and slightly crumpled, as if thrown on in haste. This, Dolly surmised, was Dinah Lee. Morning, Dinah called, her voice bold but wary. "You're Mrs. Bantry, aren't you?" And she squinted at Miss Marple, clearly puzzled by the older woman's prim appearance. "Miss Marple, a friend," Dolly said briskly. "We're here about Ruby Keene. You've heard, I suppose." Dina's face tightened, and she leaned against the porch railing, lighting a cigarette with a flick of her wrist. "Heard. The whole village is yapping about it. Poor kid, dead in your library. Basil's an estate, thinks the police have him pegged for it." Miss Marple's tone was gentle, almost grandmotherly. "Miss Lee, we're trying to understand Ruby's connection to Mr. Blake. He says they were friends, nothing more. Can you tell us about her?" Dinah exhaled a plume of smoke, her eyes narrowing. Ruby was a laugh, full of dreams. "Met her at the Majestic a few times when I was there with Basil. She'd dance, we'd chat. She wanted to be a star film stage, the lot. Basil liked her, sure, but it wasn't serious. He's not the settling kind, and Ruby knew it." Dolly, impatient, pressed further. "Did you see Ruby with Basil recently, or hear of any trouble between them?" Dinah hesitated, her fingers tapping the railing. "Not recently, no. Last time was a month ago, maybe. Ruby came here once, dropped by after a dance. We had drinks, played the gramophone. She was all excited about some old gent at the Hotel Jefferson, I think, saying he'd back her career, but trouble. None, I saw. Basil's no saint, but he wouldn't hurt a girl." Her voice held a defensive edge, and Miss Marple noted the way her gaze darted toward the cottage, as if expecting Basil to appear. "And last night," Miss Marple said softly, "where was Mr. Blake?" Dinah stubbed out her cigarette, her movements abrupt. "Here, like he told you. Working late, messing with his scripts. I was in London, got back this morning. Look, I know Basil's got a reputation, parties, fast cars, but he's not a killer. The police are barking up the wrong tree." Dolly frowned. "Then why's he so nervous?" "He's hiding something, Miss Lee." Dina's lips twitched, but she shrugged. "Ask him. I'm not his keeper." Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Inspector Slack, his police car screeching to a stop. He strode up, his lean face set in a scowl. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said curtly, meddling again. "And you, Miss Lee, I'll need a word." Dinah rolled her eyes, but followed him inside, leaving Dolly and Miss Marple to retreat to the Daimler. "She's loyal to Basil," Dolly said, "but she's worried. Did you catch that pause when she mentioned last night?" Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking. "Loyal, yes, and perhaps a little jealous. Ruby's visit here may have stirred trouble we haven't yet seen." Their next stop was the Majestic Hotel, where the midday bustle was in full swing. Guests strolled the promenade, parasols twirling, while porters darted with luggage. Mr. Prescott, the manager, met them in the lobby, his walrus moustache drooping with fatigue. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, "the police are still here, questioning staff. This business is ruining us. Have you learned anything?" Dolly shook her head. "Not enough, but we're trying. We'd like to see Mr. Jefferson again, and Josie Turner if she's about." Prescott led them to the terrace, where Conway Jefferson sat in his wheelchair, a rug over his knees, gazing at the sea. Mark Gaskell lounged nearby, flipping through a newspaper, while Adelaide Jefferson sat with a book, her face composed but distant. Conway's eyes lit at their approach. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, come, join me. This tragedy weighs on us all." His warmth was genuine, but Miss Marple noted the strain in his features, the way his hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Dolly," settling into a wicker chair, wasted no time. "Mr. Jefferson, we've just come from Basil Blake's. He knew Ruby, but he denies seeing her last night. Can you tell us more about her time here? Any enemies, any worries?" Conway sighed, his gaze drifting to the horizon. Enemies. Ruby was too young, too vibrant for that. She charmed everyone guest's staff, but she was ambitious, perhaps too trusting. I warned her to be careful, but she laughed it off, said she could handle herself. Mark Gaskell lowered his paper, his smile wry. Handle herself. Ruby was a magnet for trouble. Not her fault, mine, just the way she was. Men noticed her, and not all of them were gentlemen. Adelaide's book snapped shut. "Mark, that's unfair." Ruby was kind to Conway, and he too. She didn't deserve this. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a flicker of anger. Miss Marple, knitting quietly, interjected. "Mr. Gaskell, you mentioned seeing Basil Blake here. Did he seem possessive of Ruby?" Mark shrugged, lighting a cigarette. "Possessive? Not exactly. But he was keen, hanging about like a puppy. Ruby played along, she liked the attention. I saw them on the terrace once, heads together, laughing. Didn't think much of it till now." Conway frowned. "I wish I'd paid more attention. Ruby deserved better than this." His voice broke, and Adelaide touched his arm, her expression softening. Josie Turner appeared then, carrying a tray of tea. Her navy dress was crisp, her dark hair pinned neatly, but her face was pale, her eyes shadowed. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, setting the tray down. "I didn't expect you back so soon." Dolly, accepting a cup, studied her. "Miss Turner, we've been to Basil Blake's. He says Ruby visited his cottage once, with Dinah. Lee, did she ever talk about him to you?" Josie's hand faltered, a teaspoon clattering against the saucer. "Basil, she mentioned him, yes. A friend," she said. "I didn't think it was serious. Ruby had lots of friends." Miss Marple's tone was gentle, and her mood, Miss Turner, did it change in the days before her death? Any sign she was afraid? Josie's lips tightened. She was tired, that's all. The dancing, the late nights. She didn't say she was scared. If she was, she hid it well. Her words were clipped, and Miss Marple noted the way her gaze slid away, avoiding Conway's. Dolly, less tactful, pressed on. "And this plan of Mr. Jefferson's to help Ruby's career, how did you feel about it?" Josie stiffened. "I was glad for her. She deserved a chance. I only wanted her to be happy." Their talk was interrupted by Inspector Slack, who strode onto the terrace, his notebook in hand. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, his tone brusque. "I've just come from Blake's. His story's flimsy, no alibi, and he's cagey about Ruby. I'm bringing him in for questioning." Conway's face fell. "Basil, surely not. He's a fool, perhaps, but a murderer." Slack grunted. "We'll see. Miss Turner, I'll need you at the station. Later, more questions about Ruby's last hours." Josie nodded, her expression unreadable, and excused herself. As they left the majestic, Dolly whispered to Miss Marple, "Josie's too calm, don't you think? And Mark Gaskell, he's too quick to point at Basil. Something's off." Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking in her lap. "Off, indeed. Basil Blake casts a shadow, but it's not the only one. Ruby's death was planned, Dolly, and the library was chosen for a reason. We must look closer at motives, at movements." They drove back to Gossington Hall, the sea fading behind them, the puzzle of Ruby Keane's death growing ever more. intricate. Miss Marple's mind, sharp as her knitting needles, turned over each detail: the sapphire bracelet, Josie's restraint, Basil's fear, Conway's grief. The shadow of Basil Blake loomed, but it was only one thread in a tapestry of deceit, and she would not rest until the whole was revealed. Chapter 5. The Wealthy Widower. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Gossington Hall, casting delicate patterns on the drawing-room floor where Dolly Bantry paced her coffee untouched. The events of the past to Ruby Keane's body in the library, the visits to the majestic hotel, the unsettling encounter with Basil Blake had left her restless, her practical nature chafing against the mystery's opacity. Colonel Bantry, buried in the Times, grumbled about Inspector Slack's heavy-handed methods, while Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her knitting needles moving with their familiar rhythm. The sapphire bracelet, Josie Turner's guarded demeanor, and Conway Jefferson's affection for Ruby occupied her thoughts, each a thread in the intricate web she was determined to untangle. "Dolly," Miss Marple said at last, her voice soft but firm, "we must return to the majestic today. Mr. Jefferson's role in Ruby's life is more significant than we've yet grasped. His wealth, his intentions, these are motives for others, even if he himself is blameless." Dolly stopped pacing, her eyes brightening. "You're right, Jane. That old man's plan to back Ruby's career stirred something: jealousy, perhaps, or greed. And Josie Turner, she's too composed, too careful. Let's go now, before Slack muddles things further." Colonel Bantry, lowering his paper, sighed. "Mind you, don't cross that inspector, Dolly. He's got his teeth into Blake, and won't thank you for interfering." But Dolly was already ringing for the car, her resolve unshaken. The drive to Danamoth was swift, the coastal road lined with hedgerows bursting into summer bloom. The majestic hotel, when they arrived, shimmered in the midday light, its stucco facade a beacon of faded elegance. The lobby bustled with guests, some bound for the tennis courts, others lingering over cocktails in the lounge. Mr. Prescott, the manager, greeted them with a weary nod, his walrus mustache drooping lower than ever. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, his voice strained, "you're back. The police are still here, turning the place upside down. Mr. Jefferson's in the conservatory, if you wish to see him. He's been asking after you." They found Conway Jefferson in a glass-walled conservatory, his wheelchair positioned beside a profusion of ferns and orchids. The sea sparkled beyond, a restless expanse under the June sky. Conway's face, lined but animated, lit with a smile as they approached. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, a pleasure to see familiar faces amid this chaos." His warmth was genuine, but his hands, resting on the rug across his knees, trembled slightly. Beside him sat Adelaide Jefferson, her fair hair catching the light, her dove-grey dress as understated as her manner. Mark Gaskell was absent, a fact Miss Marple noted with interest. Dolly, settling into a wicker chair, opened with her usual directness. "Mr. Jefferson, we're trying to make sense of Ruby's death and why she was found in our home. You were fond of her, we know. Can you tell us more about your plans for her?" Conway's eyes softened, a flicker of sorrow crossing his features. "Ruby was a rare creature," he said, his voice low. "She had spirit, ambition, qualities I admired. My wife and children are gone, you see, lost in a motor accident years ago. Ruby reminded me of my daughter, Rosamond, in her youth. I wanted to give her a chance, to lift her from this provincial stage to something grander. A school in London, perhaps, or a place in a theatre company. I told her so only a week ago." Adelaide, who who had been gazing at the orchids, spoke quietly. Conway was generous, perhaps too generous. Ruby was grateful, but I worried she might misunderstand his intentions. Her words were careful, her tone neutral, but Miss Marple caught the faint tightening of her lips. Misunderstand? She prompted, her needles pausing. Adelaide hesitated, then continued. She was young, impressionable. Conway's wealth, his kindness, it could turn a girl's head. I didn't want her to build false hopes, or to attract unwanted attention. Dolly frowned, her mind leaping to the sapphire bracelet. Attention, you say, like gifts. We found a sapphire bracelet in Ruby's room, far too costly for a dancer's wages. Do you know anything about it? Conway's brow furrowed, and he shook his head. A bracelet? No, I gave her no such thing. I offered support, not trinkets. Ruby never struck me as the sort to flaunt jewelry. Adelaide's expression remained impassive, but her fingers twisted the hem of her handkerchief. A gesture Miss Marple noted with quiet interest. At that moment, Josie Turner entered her, navy dress crisp, her dark hair pinned as severely as ever. She carried a notebook, her role as Conway's bridge hostess evident in her brisk efficiency. Mr. Jefferson, I've arranged the evening's tables, she said, then paused, seeing the visitors. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, I didn't expect. You. Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered with something wariness, perhaps, or fatigue. Conway gestured her forward. Josie, sit. These ladies are asking about Ruby. You knew her better than anyone. Tell them what you can. Josie perched on a chair, her hands clasped tightly. I've told the police everything, she said. Her tone measured. Ruby was my cousin, but more like a sister. She came to the Majestic because I got her the job. She was a brilliant dancer, full of dreams. London, the stage. She worked hard, but the late nights wore her down. That last evening, she seemed distracted, but she didn't say why. I thought it was just exhaustion. Dolly, leaning forward, pressed her, distracted. Did she mention Basil Blake, or anyone else? A lover, perhaps, who might have given her that bracelet? Josie's lips thinned, and she shook her head. Basil, she spoke of him now and then, a friend, nothing more. As for lovers, Ruby had admirers, but she kept them at arm's length. She was focused on her career, on Mr. Jefferson's offer. If she had a bracelet, she never showed it to me. Her words were firm, but Miss Marple, watching closely, saw the slight tremor in her hands, the way her gaze avoided Conway's. And Mr. Jefferson's plan, Miss Marple said gently. How did it affect you, Miss Turner? Ruby's good fortune must have been a relief, knowing she'd be secure. Josie's eyes flashed, a rare crack in her composure. Relief, of course. I wanted the best for her. Mr. Jefferson's kindness was a godsend. I only wished she'd lived to see it. Conway reached out, patting her hand. Josie's been a rock, he said. She looked after Ruby, and she looks after me. I don't know what I'd do without her. Josie smiled faintly, but Miss Marple noted the strain in her expression, the way her shoulders stiffened under Conway's touch. Their conversation was interrupted by Mark Gaskell's arrival, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his dark hair dishevelled. He carried a glass of whiskey, his charming smile tinged with impatience. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, nodding, still playing detectives. Conway, you'll tire yourself with all this talk. Conway waved him off. Nonsense, Mark. These ladies are helping, which is more than I can say for that bulldog of an inspector. Mark raised an eyebrow, settling into a chair. Slack. He's got Blake in his sights, and good luck to him. That chop's trouble always was. Dolly, seizing the opening, turned to Mark. You've mentioned Basil Blake before. Mr. Gaskell, what makes you so sure he's involved? Did you see him with Ruby recently? Mark took a sip of his drink, his eyes narrowing. See him? Not lately, but I know his type. He was sniffing around Ruby last month. All slick talk and promises. She lapped it up, young girls do. If she crossed him, or if he got jealous, who knows what he'd do. Adelaide's voice cut in, sharp and low. Mark, that's speculation. We don't know Basil did anything. Let's not make things worse. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her gaze moving from Mark to Adelaide. Mr. Gaskell, she said mildly, you seem concerned. About Ruby's admirers. Were there others, besides Basil, who might have caused trouble? Mark shrugged, his smile returning. Plenty of men noticed Ruby. She was a looker, and she knew it. Guests, Staffovan, old Pristcott, had a soft spot for her. But Basil's the one with a temper, from what I hear. Conway frowned, his voice sharp. Enough, Mark. Ruby was no flirt. She was a good girl, and I won't have her name dragged through the mud. The tension was palpable, and Dolly, sensing the need for a change, rose. Mr. Jefferson, you've been most helpful. We'll let you rest now. Miss Turner, if you think of anything at all, please let us know. Josie nodded, her expression unreadable, and escorted them to the lobby, where Prescott awaited, wringing his hands. Any progress? He asked, his voice hopeful. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Progress, Mr. Prescott, is a slow business. But we are not without hope. As they stepped onto the promenade, Dolly whispered, Mark Gaskell's too quick to blame Basil. And Josie's hiding something, I'd stake my hat on it. What do you make of it, Jane? Miss Marple, pausing to adjust her shawl, replied, Motives, Dolly. Conway's wealth is a magnet, and Ruby was its focus. Mark, Adelaide, Josie, they all have stakes in his decisions, and that bracelet, a clue to a relationship we haven't yet uncovered. They climbed into the Daimler, the sea breeze sharp against their faces, and drove back to St. Mary Mead. At Gossington Hall they found Colonel Bantry in the garden, arguing with the gardener over rose pruning. Dolly, Jane, he called, Slack's been here. Says Blake's sticking to his story, but he's got no proof he was home. They're searching his cottage now. Dolly's eyes widened, searching. If they find something, it could clinch. It. Miss Marple shook her head, her needles clicking in her lap. Or mislead us, Dolly. Basil Blake is a puzzle, but he's not the whole picture. Conway Jefferson's world, his money, his affections is where the truth lies. We must watch and listen and wait. That evening, as the Bantrys dined, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting a soft accompaniment to her thoughts. The wealthy widower, with his generous heart and tangled family, was at the centre of Ruby's story. But whose hand had struck her down, and why had her body been laid in the Bantrys Library? The answer, Miss Marple knew, lay in the shadows cast by wealth and desire, and she would follow those shadows until the light broke through. Chapter 6. A question of character. The morning air in St. Mary Mead carried the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming lavender, a deceptive calm over a village abuzz with whispers about Ruby Keane's murder. At Gossington Hall, the breakfast table was a sombre affair. Colonel Bantry, his toast untouched, scanned the morning paper for news of the case, finding only vague reports that irritated him. Dolly Bantry, stirring her tea, recounted their latest findings from the majestic hotel there. Tensions among Conway Jefferson's circle, the elusive sapphire bracelet, and Basil Blake's shaky alibi. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the window with her knitting, listened intently, her pale blue eyes sharp behind her spectacles. The puzzle of Ruby's death was growing more intricate, and she sensed the key lay not just in facts, but in the characters of those entwined in her life. "Dolly," Miss Marple said, her needles pausing, "we've been looking at Ruby's connections, her admirers, her ambitions, but we've yet to fully understand the people around her. Character, my dear, reveals motive. Today, we must seek out those who knew Ruby in St. Mary Mead, and perhaps revisit Dinah Lee. Her loyalty to Basil Blake is telling, but it may hide more than it reveals." Dolly nodded, her practical mind eager for action. "You're right, Jane. The village is a hotbed of gossips. Someone must have seen Ruby with Basil, or heard something, and Dinesh is fierce, but I wager she knows more than she's letting on. Let's start at the post office. Mrs. Price never misses a thing." Colonel Bantry, folding his paper, grunted. "Gossip's all very well, but Slack's got his claws into Blake. Searched his cottage yesterday. Found nothing, but he's not letting go. If you ask me, the answer's at the Majestic, with that Jefferson lot and their money." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Perhaps, Colonel, but villagers have their own secrets. Ruby's presence here, even fleetingly, left traces. We must follow them." With that, they planned their day. A morning in St. Mary Mead, then an afternoon returned to Danimouth to probe further into Conway's world. The village high street was a picture of pastoral order cottages, with roses climbing their walls, the church spire piercing the sky, the blue boar in humming with early custom. At the post office, Mrs. Price, a stout woman with a hawkish gaze, presided over her counter, sorting letters with a speed that belied her penchant for lingering conversation. Her eyes lit up at the sight of Dolly and Miss Marple. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple's such a dreadful business at Gossington Hall. That poor girl found in your library. The village can talk of nothing else." She leaned forward, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "They say she was a dancer, mixed up with that Basil Blake. A bad sort, if you ask me." Dolly, accustomed to Mrs. Price's flair for drama, steered the conversation. "We're trying to learn about Ruby Keene, Mrs. Price. Did you ever see her in St. Mary Mead, perhaps with Basil?" Mrs. Price's lips pursed, her memory as sharp as her tongue. "See her? Once. I did. About a month back. A flashy girl, blonde, in a cheap red dress. She was coming out of Blake's cottage arm. In arm with him, laughing fit to burst. I thought, there's trouble brewing. His girl, Dinah Lee, was away, you see, and tongues wagged. Ruby didn't look like she belonged here too much, lipstick for St. Mary Mead." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her tone gentle. "And Dinah Lee'd she know of Ruby's visit?" Mrs. Price's eyes gleamed. "No, she found out, all right. Young Tommy Pierce, the baker's boy, saw Dinah storming into the cottage a week later, shouting at Blake, said she was fit to be tied, calling Ruby a hussy and worse. Mind you, Dinah's no angel herself, fawnsing about in those modern frocks." Dolly frowned. "A row, then. Did anyone see Ruby here after that?" Mrs. Price shook her head. "Not that I heard. She was a Danimouth girl, kept to the hotel, I reckon." But Blake's cottage is close to your place, Mrs. Bantry. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? They left the post office with Mrs. Price's, words ringing in their ears, the image of Ruby at Basil's cottage, a vivid thread in the tapestry. Jealousy, Darley said as they walked toward the vicarage. That's what Mrs. Price is hinting at. Dinah and Ruby vying for Basil's attention. Could Dinah have? Miss Marple shook her head. Possible, Dolly, but unlikely. Dinah's temper is fiery, but murder requires a colder heart. Still, we must speak to her. Her loyalty to Basil may be shielding something else. At the vicarage, they found the vicar's wife, Mrs. Clement, hosting a Women's Institute meeting. She welcomed them warmly, her round face clouded with concern. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, what a terrible affair. Poor Ruby Keene, and in your home, the vicar's been praying for clarity. Over tea and scones, they probed for village insights. Mrs. Clement, less gossipy than Mrs. Price, but observant, recalled seeing Basil Blake's car, flashy green roadster, speeding toward Gossington Hall's lane a fortnight ago, with a blonde girl in the passenger seat. I couldn't swear it was Ruby, she said, but it struck me as odd. Basil's not one for village visits, except to rile the neighbours. This new detail quickened Dolly's pulse. Basil near our place, with a girl, Jane, that's no coincidence. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Perhaps not, but we must be cautious. Appearances deceive, and Basil's car is not proof of murder. Let us visit Dinah Lee now, before we return to Danamoth. They thanked Mrs. Clement and set out for Basil's cottage, the village's quiet lanes, belying the storm of suspicion brewing within. Dinah Lee was in the cottage garden, pruning roses with a vigour that suggested more frustration than horticultural zeal. Her auburn hair was tied back, her green dress smudged with earth. She straightened at their approach, her expression wary, but defiant. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, she said, tossing a clipped stem aside. Back again. If it's about Basil, I've told you all I know. He's no killer, whatever Slack thinks. Dolly, undeterred, smiled tightly. We're not here to accuse, Miss Lee, but we've heard things about Ruby visiting this cottage, about a row between you and Basil. Can you set us straight? Dinah's eyes flashed, and she wiped her hands on her dress. A row. Village busybodies, I suppose. Yes, Ruby came here once, weeks ago. Basil invited her, said she needed cheering up, what with her long hours at the Majestic. We had drinks, played records. I didn't mind at first, she was fun, full of big plans. But then I caught her flirting with Basil, batting her lashes. Giggling like a schoolgirl, I told her to back off. Basil's mine, and I don't share. Her voice was fierce, but Miss Marple noted the tremor in her hands, the way her gaze flicked toward the cottage. And Basil, Miss Marple said gently, how did he react to this? Misunderstanding? Dinah snorted, her defiance softening. He laughed it off, said Ruby was just a kid with stars in her eyes. But I wasn't laughing. I gave him an earful later, told him to keep her away. He swore he did no more visits, no more Ruby, and I believe him. Last night he was here, working, like I told you. I was in London, but I know Basil. He's not the type to strangle a girl and dump her in your library. Dolly raised an eyebrow. Then why is he so jumpy? Mrs. Price says you and Basil fought over Ruby. If it was nothing, why the fuss? Dinah's jaw tightened, and she turned back to the roses, her shears snapping shut. Fuss. I've got a temper, Mrs. Bantry, and I don't like being played for a fool. But that's between me and Basil. Ruby's dead, and I'm sorry for it, but it's nothing to do with us. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've work to do." She stalked into the cottage, the door slamming behind her. Dolly sighed. She's prickly as those roses, but she's protecting Basil. Jane, did you see her hands shake? Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. Protecting, yes, and perhaps herself. Dinah's jealousy is real, but it's not the whole story. We must look elsewhere for the cold calculation behind Ruby's death. Let us go to the Majestic now, Dolly. Conway Jefferson's circle holds answers. I'm sure of it. They returned to the Daimler, the cottages. Red door, a stark contrast to the village's muted tones. Its occupant a puzzle within a puzzle at the Majestic Hotel. The afternoon sun bathed the terrace in golden light, where guests sipped tea and murmured about the scandal. Mr. Prescott, ever harried, escorted them to the lounge, where Conway Jefferson sat with Adelaide Jefferson, a chessboard between them. Mark Gaskell lounged nearby, flipping through a magazine, his casual air at odds with the tension in the room. Conway's face brightened at their arrival. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you're persistent, I'll give you that. Any news of this dreadful business?" His voice was warm, but his eyes held a weariness that spoke of sleepless nights. Dolly, settling beside Adelaide, opened with her usual candour. "We've been in St. Mary Mead, Mr. Jefferson, talking to those who knew Ruby. Basil Blake's name keeps cropping up, but so does yours. Your plan to help Ruby, how did it sit with those around you?" Conway's smile faded, his hands tightening on his wheelchair's arms. "My plan, it was simply a chance for a talented girl to shine. I told her I'd fund her training, perhaps adopt her formally. She was like family to me, you see, filling a void left by my own losses. But not everyone approved, I suppose." Adelaide, moving a chess piece, spoke softly. "It wasn't disapproval, Conway. I just thought it sudden. Ruby was charming, but we didn't know her well. I worried it might complicate things for you, for us." Her tone was measured, but Miss Marple caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. Mark, tossing his magazine aside, laughed dryly. "Complicate? That's putting it mildly, Addie. Conway's money is a magnet, and Ruby was no fool. She knew a good thing when she saw it. Pity someone else saw it too, and didn't like it." Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze settling on Mark. "You speak of motives, Mr. Gaskell. Did you suspect someone specific? A rival, perhaps, or someone who felt threatened by Ruby's place in Mr. Jefferson's affections?" Mark shrugged, lighting a cigarette. "Suspect? I'm no detective, Miss Marple. But Ruby had a knack for stirring things up. Men, women. Didn't matter. Josie Turner, for instance, she was close to Conway, too. Might not have liked sharing him." Adelaide's head snapped up. "Mark, that's unfair. Josie was devoted to Ruby. She's devastated." At that moment, Josie Turner entered, carrying a tray of lemonade. Her navy dress was immaculate, but her face was pale, her eyes shadowed. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, setting the tray down. "I didn't know you were here." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor, a detail Miss Marple noted with interest. Dolly, seizing the opportunity, turned to her. "Miss Turner, we've heard about Ruby's visit to Basil Blake's cottage, and a row with Dinah Lee. Did Ruby ever mention any trouble there, or with anyone else?" Josie's lips tightened, and she poured the lemonade with deliberate care, trouble. Ruby didn't say much about Basil. They were friends, that's all. As for Dinah, I heard she was jealous, but Ruby laughed it off. She was used to people fussing over her. If there was trouble, she kept it to herself. Miss Marple's tone was gentle. And you, Miss Turner, how did you feel about Mr. Jefferson's plans for Ruby? It must have been a great change for you both. Josie's eyes flickered, but her voice remained even. I was happy for her. Conway's offer was her dream come true. I only wanted her to be safe. Conway reached out, touching Josie's arm. Josie's been a saint, he said. She supported Ruby, kept her grounded. This loss has hit her hard. Josie smiled faintly, but Miss Marple saw the strain in her posture, the way her fingers gripped the tray. Their talk was cut short by Inspector Slack's arrival, his lean face set in a scowl. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, I've just been with Blake. He's sticking to his story, but we're digging. Miss Turner, I'll need you at the station tomorrow. More questions about Ruby's last hours. Josie nodded, her expression unreadable, and excused herself. As they left the majestic Dolly whispered, Josie's like a locked box, Jane. And Marky's stirring the pot, pointing at everyone but himself. What's his game? Miss Marple, adjusting her shawl, replied, a game of distraction, perhaps. But character, Dolly, is the key. Josie's restraint, Mark's recklessness, Adelaide's caution, they all shape this crime. And Ruby, poor child, was caught in their currents. They drove back to Gossington Hall, the sea fading into dusk, the question of character looming larger than ever. Miss Marple's mind, as sharp as her needles, turned over each encounter, knowing the truth lay not in what was said, but in what was left unsaid. Chapter 7. The night of the dance. The morning mist had burned away, leaving St. Mary Mead bathed in the soft glow of a June sun. At Gossington Hall, the air was thick with tension. The memory of Ruby Keane's body in the library, a wound that refused to heal. Dolly Bantry, pouring tea in the morning room, was restless. Her thoughts tangled with the threads of their investigation. Conway Jefferson's generosity, Josie Turner's guarded silences, Basil Blake's evasions, and the enigmatic sapphire. Bracelet, Colonel Bantry, polishing his golf clubs with unnecessary vigor, muttered about the police's obsession with Blake and the scandal's toll on their reputation. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the window with her knitting, was a study in calm, her pale blue eyes tracing patterns only she could see. The murder, she knew, was a tapestry of human flaws, and the night of Ruby's dance at the Majestic held the key to its design. Dolly, Miss Marple said, her needles clicking softly. We've learned much about Ruby's world, but her final hours remain a shadow. We must reconstruct that night, the dance, her movements, the people around her. The Majestic is a stage, and every player has a part. I propose we return there today, and perhaps enlist Inspector Slack's aid to clarify the timeline. Dolly set down her teacup, her eyes brightening. A splendid idea, Jane. Slack's a bulldog, but he'll have details we don't, and I want another look at Ruby's things. That bracelet keeps nagging at me. Arthur, you'll manage here. Colonel. Bantry grunted, waving a polishing cloth. Manage. I'll be dodging reporters all day. Go, but don't let Slack bully you. The drive to Danimouth was swift, the coastal road alive with gulls and the sparkle of the sea. The Majestic Hotel, when they arrived, was a hive of activity, its lobby filled with guests preparing for a garden fete. Mr. Prescott, the manager, greeted them with his usual harried air, his walrus moustache twitching. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, mopping his brow, you're tireless. The police are here. Inspector Slack's in my office, going over statements. This affair is a nightmare for business. Dolly smiled tightly. We're here to help, Mr. Prescott. We'd like to see Slack, and perhaps Ruby's room, again. There's more to learn about her last night. Prescott led them to his office, where Inspector Slack stood over a desk strewn with papers, his lean face set in a scowl. A young constable scribbled notes nearby. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, Slack said, his tone brusque but less hostile than before. What now? I've got Blake in my sights, and I don't need amateurs muddying the waters. Miss Marple's smile was disarming. No muddying, Inspector. We seek only to clarify Ruby Keene's final hours, her movements that night might. You share what you've learned. Slack hesitated, then shrugged, sensing their persistence. Fine, but don't expect miracles. The girl's last night is a puzzle, and we're short on pieces. He spread a sheet of notes before them, his voice clipped. Ruby Keene danced her solo at 10:30 a foxtrot. Showy number, got the crowd clapping. Witnesses, guests, staff say she was in high spirits, all smiles. After, she joined Conway Jefferson's table for supper. Jefferson, his son-in-law, Mark Gaskell, daughter-in-law, Adelaide Jefferson, and Josie Turner. They ate, chatted, nothing amiss. Around midnight, Ruby said she had a headache and left the ballroom. A porter, George Bartlett, saw her enter the lift, heading up. That's the last anyone saw her. Her room was empty, bed unslept in. No one saw her leave the hotel. No taxis, no cars. Then poof, she's in your library, strangled. Dolly frowned, her mind racing. Midnight to 7, and no trace of her leaving. That's impossible, Inspector. Someone must have seen something. Slack's scowl deepened. You'd think. We've questioned every doorman, every maid. Nothing. The French windows at your place were unlatched, but no footprints on the lawn. It's as if she was spirited away. Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze thoughtful. Spirited, perhaps, but by human hands. The lift, you say, did it stop only at her floor? Slack nodded. Bartlett says it went straight to the 3rd floor, where her room is. No other stops. Miss Marple's tone was gentle. And the supper table, any discord, any hint of trouble? Slack flipped through his notes. Not much. Jefferson was doting, as usual. Gaskell was his charming self, maybe a bit sharp about Ruby's ambitions. Adelaide was quiet, Josie attentive. One guest, a Mrs. Polk, overheard Ruby tell Josie she felt off, not just a headache, but nervous. Josie brushed it off, said she needed rest. That's all we've got. Dolly's eyes narrowed. Nervous, that's new. Josie didn't mention that yesterday. Determined to see Ruby's room again, they followed Prescott to the 3rd floor. The modest chamber was unchanged, narrow bed, chipped wardrobe, small dressing table, Ruby's. Dance costumes still hung in the wardrobe, their sequins catching the light. On the dressing table lay the photograph of Ruby and Josie on the pier, their smiles frozen in time. Dolly opened the jewelry box, lifting the sapphire bracelet with a frown. This, Jane's still no explanation. Ruby didn't wear it, Josie. Claims ignorance, and Conway denies giving it. Who, then? Miss Marple examined the bracelet, its stones glinting coldly. A gift, Dolly, but not one of affection. It's a clue to a secret, I'm sure. They returned to the lobby, where Slack was conferring with his constable. Inspector, Miss Marple said, might we speak to George Bartlett, the porter? His account of the lift is crucial. Slack, grumbling, sent for Bartlett, a wiry young man with a nervous tic. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, twisting his cap. I've told the inspector everything. Miss Keene got in the lift at midnight, said she was going to her room. I took her up to the 3rd floor, no stops. She looked peaky, but she smiled, said good night. Dolly pressed him, peaky. Was she anxious or just ill? Bartlett shrugged, hard to say. She was clutching her shawl like she was cold, but she didn't say nothing about being scared. Their next stop was the ballroom, where the orchestra was rehearsing for the evening's dance. The vast room, with its chandeliers and polished floor, was empty save for a few staff setting tables. Dolly imagined Ruby's final performance, her pink satin gown swirling under the lights. She danced here, she said, then sat with Conway's party. No one noticed anything odd until she left. Jane, what are we missing? Miss Marple, standing by the stage, gazed at the empty chairs. Timing, Dolly. Ruby left at midnight, yet died near midnight, per Dr. Haydock. The journey to Gossington Hall takes half an hour by car. Either she was killed here and moved swiftly, or she left earlier than we think. They sought out Mrs. Polk, the guest who'd overheard Ruby's unease, a plump, chatty woman in her 50s. She was taking tea in the lounge. Oh, Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, she said, her eyes wide. What a dreadful thing. That poor girl, so talented. I saw her dance that night, lovely, like a film star. But at supper, she was different. I was at the next table, you see, and I heard her tell Miss Turner she felt queer. Not just a headache, but as if something was wrong. Miss Turner said it was nonsense, told her to go rest. I thought it odd, her being so sharp. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her tone mild. And Miss Turner's manner, did it strike you as concerned or dismissive? Mrs. Polk pursed her lips. Dismissive, I'd say. She was all business, fussing over Mr. Jefferson. Ruby looked hurt, like she wanted comforting. I felt for her, poor lamb. Dolly, listening, felt a spark of suspicion. Josie's story keeps shifting. First she says Ruby was tired, now this. What's she hiding? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Not hiding, perhaps, but editing. Josie knows more than she tells, but whether it's guilt or loyalty, we cannot yet say. Their final inquiry was with the head waiter, Mr. Rossi, a suave Italian who'd served Conway's table. He met them in the dining room, his manner polished but strained. Signoras, he said, bowing, a tragedy, this. Miss Keene was a favourite, always polite. That night she ate little salmon, a bit of salad. She laughed with Mr. Jefferson, but I noticed her hands twisting her napkin. Nervous, I thought. Mr. Gaskell made a joke about her London dreams, and she flushed. Said she'd get there one day. Mrs. Jefferson was quiet, Miss Turner watchful. Nothing more, I swear. As they left the dining room, Dolly whispered, nervous hands, a queer feeling Ruby was afraid. Jane, but of what? Or whom? Miss Marple nodded, her shawl slipping slightly. Fear, yes, but she hid it well. Someone, at that table or nearby, triggered it. We must watch Conway's circle close, Leah Mark's jests, Adelaide's restraint, Josie's vigilance. They stepped onto the terrace, where Conway Jefferson sat with Adelaide, a book open on his lap. Mark Gaskell was absent, but Josie hovered nearby, arranging cushions with mechanical precision. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, Conway called, his voice warm but weary. You're relentless in your quest. Have you found anything? Dolly, settling beside him, chose her words carefully. "We're piecing together rubies last night, Mr. Jefferson. She seemed nervous at supper, did you notice?" Conway's brow furrowed. Nervous. She was quieter than usual, perhaps. She said her head ached, but she smiled through it. Thought she was just tired. Those dancers were grueling. Adelaide, glancing up, added, "She was pale, but I put it down to the heat." The ballroom was stifling. Josie, adjusting Conway's rug, spoke without looking up. "Ruby was overworked. I told her to slow down, but she wouldn't listen. That night she was off, but she didn't say why. I wish I'd pressed her." Her voice was steady, but Miss Marple saw the flicker of her eyelids, the slight clench of her jaw. "Miss Turner," she said gently, "did Ruby confide in you about any fears, any troubles?" Josie's eyes met hers, cool and guarded. Fears? No. She was ambitious, not afraid. If she was worried, she kept it to herself. Their talk was interrupted by Inspector Slack's arrival, his notebook in hand. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, "we've rechecked Blake's alibis, still nothing solid. But we found a witness, a barman, who saw Ruby near the terrace at 11:30, talking to a man. Couldn't see his face, but he was tall, dark-haired. Sounds like Blake." Dolly's heart sank. Talking, not arguing. Slack nodded. Just talking doesn't clear him, but it complicates things. He turned to Josie. "Miss Turner, we'll need you again tomorrow. Don't leave Danimouth." As they left, the majestic Dolly's mind raced. A man on the terrace, Jane Basil, or someone else. And Josie, she's too smooth, too controlled. Miss Marple, adjusting her hat against the sea breeze, replied, "Control, Dolly, is a mask. Josie wears it well, but it's slipping." The night of the dance was Ruby's last act, and someone in that hotel wrote its ending. We must find the script. They drove back to Gossington Hall, the sun sinking behind them, the mystery of Ruby's final hours sharper than ever. Miss Marple's mind, as keen as her needles, wove together the night's fragments' nervous hands, a sapphire's gleam, a shadowed figure on the terrace. The truth was close, she felt, but it danced just out of reach. Chapter 8. The alibi unravels. The dawn broke over St. Mary Mead with a gentle warmth, the village stirring under a sky streaked with pink and gold. At Gossington Hall, the weight of Ruby Keane's murder hung heavy, its shadow darkening the Bantrys' once peaceful home. Dolly Bantry, sipping coffee in the morning room, was a bundle of restless energy, her thoughts circling the revelations of Ruby's final night at the majestic hotel, the nervous glances, the sapphire bracelet, the mysterious man on the terrace. Colonel Bantry, leafing through his correspondence, grumbled about the police's fixation on Basil Blake and the persistent reporters lurking at the gate. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the hearth with her knitting, was a study in quiet concentration, her pale blue eyes tracing invisible patterns. The threads of the case: Conway, Jefferson's generosity, Josie Turner's restraint. Basil's evasions were tightening, and she sensed a break was near. "Dolly," Miss Marple said, her needles pausing, "we've mapped Ruby's last hours, but the how and why of her journey to your library remain elusive. Basil Blake's role is pivotal, I fear. His cottage's proximity, his connection to Ruby, these cannot be coincidence. We must press him further, and I'd like to hear more from Inspector Slack. His witness on the terrace is a new piece, but it may mislead if we're not careful." Dolly set down her cup, her eyes alight. "You're right, Jane. Basil's story is flimsier than a house of cards, and that terrace sighting, tall, dark-haired, it fits him, but it could fit others, like Mark Gaskell. Let's start with Slack, then track down Basil. Arthur, you'll hold the fort. Colonel Bantry waved a letter dismissively. Fort, it's a siege out there. Go, but don't expect Slack to roll out the welcome mat. Their first stop was the Much Benham police station, a squat brick building buzzing with activity. Inspector. Slack, hunched over a desk cluttered with reports, greeted them with his usual scowl, though a glint of grudging respect flickered in his eyes. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, pushing back his chair, you're like hounds on a scent. What now? I'm up to my neck in statements, and Blake's still my best bet. Miss Marple's smile was mild, disarming. We share your interest in Mr. Blake, Inspector. You're witness the barman who saw Ruby with a man on the terror scan. You tell us more. And have you uncovered anything new about Basil's movements? Slack flipped open his notebook, his tone clipped but cooperative. The barman, Ted Harris, saw Ruby at 11:30 near the terrace doors. She was talking to a tall chap, dark hair, wearing a dinner jacket. Couldn't see his face, but Harris swears they were close, like they knew each other. Ruby looked tense, he said, not her usual bubbly self. They spoke for a minute, then she went back inside. That's all he's got. As for Blake, his alibi's a mess. Says he was at his cottage, alone, writing scripts. No witnesses, no proof. But here's the kicker. Taxi driver Jim Cole came forward last night. Says he dropped Blake at the gates of Gossington Hall at 1 a.m. on the night of the murder. Blake claims he was meeting Ruby, but she never showed, so he went home. Convenient, eh? Dolly's heart sank, her mind racing. Juan, antes do meio-dia. That's after Ruby was killed. If Dr. Haydock's right about midnight, why go to our place at all? Slack's eyes narrowed. Exactly, I think Blake's lying. He was there, all right, but not to meet her. He was dumping her body. Those French windows, unlatched, no footprint sits the only thing that fits. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her voice thoughtful. A compelling theory, Inspector, but the timing troubles me. If Ruby died at midnight, and Basil was at your gates an hour later, how did her body reach Gossington so swiftly? And without trace? Have you searched his car? Slack nodded, his scowl deepening. Searched it yesterday. No blood, no fibres, not even a blonde hair. But he's clever, I'll give him that. I've got him in for questioning today. He'll crack, mark my words. Dolly frowned, unconvinced. What about this man on the terrace? Mark Gaskell's tall, dark-haired, and he was at the supper table. Could it be him? Slack shrugged. Possible, but Gaskell's alibi holds guests saw him in the lounge till 1. Drinking with a Mr. Prescott. Blake's the one with no cover and a taxi putting him at your place. I'm not wasting time on maybes. Miss Marple's gaze was distant, as if seeing beyond the station's drab walls. A taxi, you say? Did Mr. Cole see anyone else at the gates, or notice anything odd? Slack flipped a page. Says it was dark, quiet, dropped Blake and left. No one else, no cars, but he's reliable drives for Dannemouth cabs, known him. Years. Dolly leaned forward. Inspector, let us come when you question Basil. We've spoken to him, to Dinah Lee. We might catch something you miss. Slack's jaw tightened, but he relented. Fine, but stay out of my way. He's due in an hour. Meet me at the interview room. With time to spare, Dolly and Miss Marple drove to Basil Blake's cottage, hoping to catch Dinah Lee for a final word before the confrontation. The cottage, with its red door and tangled garden, looked forlorn in the morning light, its defiance muted. Dinah was inside, packing a suitcase, her auburn hair loose and her green dress swapped for a practical skirt and blouse. She froze at their knock, her expression a mix of defiance and dread. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, blocking the doorway. "What now? I'm leaving for London Basil's, in enough trouble without me adding to it." Dolly's tone was firm but kind. "Miss Lee, we know Basil was at our gates at 1A.M. A taxi driver saw him. He says he was meeting Ruby, but she was already dead. What do you know about it?" Dina's face paled, her hands gripping the doorframe. 1A.M. He never told me that. He said he was here all night, working. If he went to your place, God, Basil, what have you done? Her voice cracked, and Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Miss Lee, if Basil is innocent, the truth will help him. Did he ever speak of meeting Ruby that night, or of any plan involving Gossington Hall?" Dinah sank onto a chair, her defiance crumbling. "No, nothing like that. He liked Ruby, sure, but it was casual drinks, laughs, nothing deep. Last week, he was odd, though jumpy, kept checking his phone. Said it was work, a film deal, but I didn't buy it. When I got back from London yesterday, he was a wreck, said the police were after him. I thought he was just scared of being framed. If he was at your place, I swear I didn't know." Dolly's eyes narrowed. "Jumpy last week, before Ruby's death. What was he hiding?" Dinah shook her head, tears welling. "I don't know. He wouldn't talk. Please, leave me be. I can't help you." They left her packing, the cottage, door closing softly behind them. "She's frightened," Dolly said as they climbed into the diner. "And not just for Basil. Something's got her spooked." Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking in her lap. "Fear, yes, but also loyalty. Dinah knows more, but she's bound to Basil, for better or worse. The taxi driver's account changes everything, Dolly. Basil's alibi is unraveling, but it may not point to murder." At the police station, they found Basil Blake in a stark interview room, his usual bravado replaced by a haggard pallor. His silk shirt was rumpled, his dark hair unkempt. Slack sat across from him, his notebook open, while a constable stood. By the door, "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," Slack said, nodding them to chairs in the corner. "Blake, let's try this again. Jim Cole says he dropped you at Gossington Hall's gates at 1A.M. You told us you were home all night. Care to explain?" Basil ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting. "All right, I lied about that. I went to Gossington, but not to hurt Ruby. She called me that afternoon, said she needed to talk something urgent. Wouldn't say what over the phone. Said to meet her at the Hall's gates at 1, that it'd be quiet. I thought it was odd, but Ruby was like that dramatic. I took a taxi, waited 20 minutes, but she never showed. It was dark, no cars, no one. I figured she'd changed her mind, so I walked home. That's the truth, I swear." Slack's voice was cold. "The truth. You lied before, Blake. Why should we believe you now? Ruby was dead by then, strangled, and you're at the scene. Convenient, her not showing." Dolly leaned forward, ignoring Slack's glare. "Basil, why Gossington Hall? Ruby had no reason to be there. What did she want to talk about?" Basil's jaw tightened, his voice low. "I don't know," she sounded. "Scared, I guess. Said it was about someone at the Majestic, but she wouldn't name them. I thought maybe a boyfriend, or trouble with that old man, Jefferson. I didn't push her, she said she'd explain when we met. When she didn't come, I was annoyed, not suspicious. Then I heard she was dead in your library, and I panicked. That's why I lied. Miss Marple's tone was gentle, cutting through the tension. Mr. Blake, did Ruby mention a sapphire bracelet or any gift she'd received? Basil blinked, surprised. A bracelet? No, nothing like that. She wasn't big on jewelry, too flashy for her, she said. If she had one, she never told me. Slack slammed his notebook shut. Enough. You're not wriggling out of this. Blake, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder. We'll see what the magistrate thinks. Basil's face drained of colour, but he said nothing as the constable led him away. Outside, Dolly's voice was urgent. Jane, he's in over his head, but I don't think he's our killer. That call from Ruby F. It's true, someone else was involved, someone she feared. Miss Marple nodded, her shawl slipping slightly. Someone, yes, but who? Basil's story, if true, suggests Ruby was lured or planned to reveal something dangerous. The terrace man, the bracelet, the midnight death all point to the Majestic, not the cottage. We must see Conway Jefferson again, Dolly. His circle holds the truth. They drove to the Majestic, the sea a restless shimmer under the afternoon sun. Conway was in the lounge, his wheelchair by a window, Adelaide Jefferson at his side. Josie Turner was absent, but Mark Gaskell lounged nearby, sipping a cocktail. Conway's face lit at their arrival. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you're tireless. I hear Blake's been arrested. Dreadful, if true. Have you news? Dolly, settling beside him, chose her words carefully. Basil claims Ruby called him, asked to meet at our gates at 1A.M. Says she was scared. Mentioned trouble at the Majestic. Did she ever hint at anything like that to you? Conway's brow furrowed, his hands tightening on his rug. Scared? No, she was always bright with me, full of plans. But she was young, impulsive perhaps. She hid her worries. I wish I'd seen it. Adelaide, her voice soft, added, she was quieter that last night, but I thought it was fatigue. If she was afraid, she didn't show it to us. Mark, setting down his glass, laughed dryly. Afraid. Ruby was a schemer, always angling for something. If she called Blake, she was probably playing him. Pity it got her killed. Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze settling on Mark. Mr. Gaskell, you speak of Ruby's scheming. Did you ever see her with anyone suspicious, apart from Basil? Mark shrugged, his smile sharp. Suspicious. She had a crowd around her guest staff, all charmed. But she was cozy with Josie, always whispering. If anyone knew her secrets, it's her cousin. Adelaide's eyes flashed. Mark, that's enough. Josie loved Ruby. Let's not invent trouble. Their talk was cut short by Pristercourt's arrival, his face ashen. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, the police are back, asking for Josie. They found something, a scarf, Ruby's, in a staff cupboard. Josie's being questioned now. Dolly's heart raced. A scarf. Where? Prescott mopped his brow. Near the service stairs, hidden in a linen cupboard. The police think its evidence may be linked to the murder. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her voice calm. Evidence, perhaps, but planted, I suspect. We must be cautious, Dolly. The net is tightening, but around whom? As they left the Majestic, Dolly's mind whirled. Jane, a scarf, Basil's, arrest, Ruby's collets, all coming apart. Who's pulling the strings? Miss Marple, adjusting her hat, replied, Someone clever, Dolly, and desperate. Basil's alibi has unraveled, but it's a distraction, I think. The truth lies in Ruby's fear and the majestic secrets. We must watch and wait and trust the pattern to emerge. They drove back to Gossington Hall, the dusk settling over the sea, the case's threads tangling ever tighter. Miss Marple's mind, as sharp as her needles, sifted each detail: the terrace shadow, the scarf's discovery, the call that never came. The killer was close, she felt, their masks slipping with every unraveling lie. Chapter 9. The motive emerges. The morning light filtered through the heavy drapes of Gossington Hall, casting a soft glow over the morning room where Dolly Bantry sat, her breakfast untouched. The relentless march of Ruby Keane's murder investigation had frayed her nerves. Each new revelation: Basil Blake's arrest, the discovery of Ruby's scarf, the mysterious terrace encounter adding weight to the mystery. Colonel Bantry, pacing by the fireplace, muttered about the press hounding their gates and Inspector Slack's bull-headed focus on Blake. Miss Jane Marple, ensconced in an armchair with her knitting, was a beacon of calm, her pale blue eyes tracing invisible threads. The case, she knew, was nearing a turning point. The motives behind Ruby's death were beginning to surface, like shadows sharpening in the dawn. "Dolly," Miss Marple said, her needles pausing, "Basil Blake's arrest is a distraction, I fear. His presence at your gates, the scarf in the cupboard, these are pieces of a larger design meant to mislead. We must focus on Conway Jefferson's world, his wealth, his plans for Ruby, and the tensions they stirred. I propose we return to the Majestic today to speak with Mr. Jefferson and observe those around him." And Josie Turner sees a puzzle, her loyalty to Ruby masking something deeper. Dolly pushed her plate aside, her eyes alight with purpose. "You're right, Jane, that scarf bothers him. It's too convenient, like a stage prop." And Mark Gaskell's snide remarks, Adelaide's silences, they're all hiding something. "Let's go now, before Slack muddles it further. Arthur, you'll manage the reporters." Colonel Bantry snorted, waving a hand. "Manage? I'm practically a prisoner in my own home. Go, but don't expect that Jefferson lot to confess over tea." Dolly rang for the car, and within the hour the Daimler was winding toward Dannymoth, the sea a restless shimmer under a cloudless sky. The Majestic Hotel, when they arrived, stood resplendent, its white facade masking the turmoil within. The lobby buzzed with guests, their chatter subdued by the scandal, and Mr. Prescott, the manager, greeted them with a weary bow, his walrus moustache drooping. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, "you're indefatigable. The police are still here, questioning Miss Turner about that scarf. Mr. Jefferson's in the library, if you wish to see him. He's taken this hard. Poor man's health isn't what it was." They found Conway Jefferson in the hotel's library, a quiet room lined with leather-bound volumes and heavy oak furniture. His wheelchair was positioned by a window, the sea breeze ruffling the pages of a book on his lap. His face, lined but still handsome, lit with a tired smile as they entered. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you're a welcome sight. This business with Ruby, it's a wound that won't heal. And now they're hounding Josie, saying she's involved. It's absurd." His voice was warm but strained, his hands trembling. Slightly on the book's cover, Adelaide Jefferson sat nearby, her fair hair catching the light, her dove-grey dress as understated as her presence. Mark Gaskell was absent, a detail Miss Marple noted with interest. Lee, settling into a chair, opened with her characteristic directness. "Mr. Jefferson, we're trying to understand why Ruby was killed. And why in our home? Your plan to help her, perhaps adopt hurt, must have caused ripples. Can you tell us how those around you reacted? Conway's eyes clouded, his fingers tightening on the book. Ripples. Yes, I suppose so. Ruby was a breath of fresh air, a reminder of my lost daughter. I wanted to give her a future schooling, a stage career, perhaps a legal adoption to secure her place. I told her a week before she died, and she was overjoyed, poor child. But others, well, not everyone saw it as I did. Adelaide, glancing up from her embroidery, spoke softly. It wasn't opposition, Conway, just concern. Your generosity was sudden, and Ruby was so young, I worried it might unsettle things. Her words were measured, but Miss Marple caught the faint strain in her voice, the way her needle hesitated. Unsettle? Miss Marple prompted, her tone gentle. Adelaide's lips pressed together, then parted. The family, our future. Conway's health is fragile, and such a change, adopting a stranger, could complicate matters. I meant no ill, but I urged caution. Dolly, her mind on the scarf, pressed further. And Josie Turner. She was Ruby's cousin, close to you both. How did she take it? Conway's face softened. Josie was thrilled for Ruby, though she hid it behind her practical front. She's been my rock, organizing my days, playing bridge, keeping me sane. She saw Ruby as family, wanted her to succeed. This talk of the scarfit's nonsense. Josie would never harm her. Miss Marple's needles clicked rhythmically, her gaze settling on Conway. And yet, Mr. Jefferson. The scarf was found in a staff cupboard, a place Josie might access. Did Ruby ever mention any tension with her cousin? Conway shook his head, his voice firm. Never. Ruby adored Josie, relied on her. They were like sisters. If there was trouble, Ruby hid it, and Josie's too loyal to speak ill of her now. Dolly frowned, unconvinced. Loyal, perhaps, but that scarf fits too neat, like someone wanted it found. Mr. Jefferson, did Ruby ever hint at danger, or someone she feared? Conway's brow furrowed, his hands stilling. Danger? No, she was all dreams and laughter with me. But that last night, she was quieter, said her head ached. I thought it was the dancing, but perhaps I should have asked more. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mark Gaskell, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, a glass of whiskey in hand despite the early hour. His charming smile was strained, his dark eyes restless. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, nodding, still chasing shadows. Conway, you'll wear yourself out with this. He sank into a chair, crossing his legs with studied ease. Conway waved him off. They're helping, Mark, which is more than I can say for your lounging. About these ladies want to know about Ruby's last days. You were at supper that night, what did you see? Mark took a sip of his drink, his smile sharp. Ruby, same as always, flirting with Conway, dazzling the room. She was off though, kept glancing at the door, like she expected someone. I teased her about her London plans, said she'd need more than charm to make it. She laughed, but it was forced. Josie was hovering, as usual, keeping an eye on her. Nothing stood out, except maybe Adelaide. She was quieter than a mouse, weren't you, Addie? Adelaide's needle jerked, a flush rising in her cheeks. Was tired, Mark. It was a long evening. Ruby seemed fine to me, just weary. Miss Marple's tone was mild, her eyes keen. Mr. Gaskell, you've suggested Ruby attracted trouble. Did you ever see her with anyone suspicious? beyond Basil Blake. Mark shrugged, his gaze sliding away. Suspicious. She was a magnet. For attention guests, staff, all sorts. I saw her once with a barman, Ted Harris, whispering by the terrace. Looked cozy, but Ruby was like that, friendly to a fault. If she had enemies, she didn't show it. Adelaide's voice was sharp. Mark, stop stirring things. Ruby was kind, not scheming. Let's not taint her memory. Dolly, seizing the moment, turned to Conway. Mr. Jefferson, your plan to adopt Ruby, did it affect your will, your finances? Forgive my bluntness, but money often breeds motive. Conway's eyes widened, then softened. Bluntness is honest, Mrs. Bantry. Yes, I planned to provide for Ruby a trust, perhaps, or a share of my estate. I hadn't finalized it, but I told Mark and Adelaide to prepare them. They weren't thrilled. Naturally, my fortune's all they have left of my support. But they're family, and I trusted them to understand. Mark laughed, a brittle sound. Understand, sure, Conway, but it's a kick in the teeth. You've been good to us, but Ruby swooping in, taking a slice that's hard to swallow. I've got debts, you know that. A gambler's life isn't cheap. Adelaide's embroidery fell to her lap, her voice low. Mark, enough. Conway's choices are his own. Ruby's gone, let's not rake over what might have been. Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze moving from Mark's defiance to Adelaide's restraint. Mr. Gaskell, she said, your debts, did Ruby's presence threaten them directly? Mark's smile faltered, his fingers tightening on his glass. Threaten, not exactly. But money's tight, and Conway's plans meant less for us. I didn't kill her, if that's what you're fishing for. I was in the lounge till 1, asked Prescott. Dolly's eyes narrowed. And Josie? She stood to lose her place with Mr. Jefferson if Ruby became family. Did she ever seem resentful? Conway's voice was sharp. Josie, never. She was Ruby's champion, always pushing her forward. This scarf business is a mistake. She's no killer. Their talk was cut short by Mr. Prescott's arrival, his face ashen. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, the police have taken Miss Turner for questioning. They're saying the scarf had traces of Ruby's perfume, definite evidence. She's denying. Everything but slacks, relentless. Dolly's heart raced. Traces of perfume. That's damning, Jane. Miss Marple's expression was unreadable, her voice calm. Damning, perhaps, but too perfect. Evidence can be crafted, Dolly. We must see Josie, if possible, and learn her side. They found Inspector Slack in the hotel's office, his notebook open, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, you're just in time. Josie Turner's in a cell, pending charges. That scarf's a clincher, Ruby's. Perfume found where Josie works. She claims she never saw it, but her prints are on the cupboard door. Care to explain that, Miss Turner? Josie, brought in under guard, was pale but composed, her navy dress creased, her dark hair slipping from its pins. Her eyes met Miss Marple's, a flicker of defiance in them. I've nothing to explain, she said, her voice steady. I never touched that scarf. Someone's setting me up. Someone who wants Ruby's death pinned on me. Double quotes Dolly, unable to hold back, pressed her. Josie, if you're innocent, help us. Did Ruby ever mention a threat, or someone she distrusted? What about that bracelet? Josie's lips tightened, her hands clenching. The bracelet. I told you, I didn't know about it. Ruby kept things from me, sometimes her admirers, her plans. That last night, she was jumpy. said she felt watched, but she wouldn't say who. I thought it was nerves, the pressure of Conway's offer. I should have listened. Her voice broke, and Miss Marple saw the first crack in her armour, a glimpse of genuine grief. Slack, unmoved, waved her back to the constable. Save it for the magistrate, Miss Turner. You're not wriggling out of this. As Josie was led away, Dolly whispered Jane, she's scared, but she's not broken. If she's lying, she's good at it. Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. Good, yes, but not flawless. Josie's protecting something Ruby's secrets, or her own. The scarf is a plant, I'm certain, meant to divert us from the true motive. They returned to the library, where Conway sat alone, Adelaide and Mark having left. His face was drawn, his hands trembling. Josie, arrested, he said, his voice hollow. It's unthinkable. She loved Ruby, loved me. This is a mistake. Miss Marple's tone was gentle. Mr. Jefferson, motives are complex. Your wealth, your affection for Rubiette, stirred envy, fear, perhaps greed. Did anyone else know of your plans, beyond your family and Josie? Conway shook his head. Only Ruby, and she was discreet. I trusted my circle, Mark, Adelaide, Josie. They're all I have. As they left the majestic Dolly's mind world. Jane, it's money, isn't it? Conway's fortune, Ruby's, someone couldn't bear it. Mark's debts, Adelaide's caution, Josie's loyalty, they're all tied to it. Miss Marple, adjusting her shawl against the sea breeze, replied, Money, yes, but also Lavore, its absence. The motive is emerging, Dolly, but it's layered like a village quilt. Ruby's death was no accident, and your library was its frame. We must look closer at the terrace, the scarf, the man who wasn't Basil. They drove back to Gossington Hall, the dusk deepening, the cases, heart beating louder. Miss Marple's mind, as keen as her needles, sifted each fragment Josie's tremor, Mark's debts, the scarf's perfume. The motive was clear, but the hand behind it remained shadowed, waiting for the final light. Chapter 10. The Second Body. The morning sun rose over St. Mary Mead with a deceptive serenity, its golden rays glinting off the dukest lawns of Gossington Hall. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but tranquil. Dolly Bantry, pacing the morning room, clutched a half-read newspaper, its headline screaming of Basil Blake's arrest and Josie Turner's detention. The weight of Ruby Keane's murder pressed harder with each passing day, the threads of Motorphono Jefferson's wealth, Mark Gaskell's debts, Josie's guarded loyalty tangling ever tighter. Colonel Bantry, polishing his spectacles with a handkerchief, muttered about the village's relentless gossip and Inspector Slack's dogged pursuit of the wrong suspects. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the window with her knitting, was a quiet anchor, her pale blue eyes sifting through the case's complexities. The scarf's discovery, Basil's midnight taxi ride, and Ruby's fear on her final night were pieces of a puzzle nearing completion. But a new shadow was about to fall. Dolly, Miss Marple said, her needles pausing, we've been circling the majestic secrets, but the answer lies in the wider net of Ruby's life. Basil's arrest and Josie's questioning are distractions, I fear, from a deeper truth. We must revisit the hotel, but also consider St. Mary Mead's role. Ruby's body in your library was no accident, it was a message. I propose we start with Inspector Slack, to learn of Josie's fate, then seek out any village connections we've overlooked. Dolly tossed the newspaper aside, her eyes blazing. You're right, Jane. That scarf was planted, and Basil's story about rubies. Collets to pat, like a script. Let's see Slack, then poke around the village. Someone knows something. Arthur, you'll fend off the press. Colonel Bantry snorted, slipping his spectacles into his pocket. Fend? I'm practically a general in a war zone out there. Go. But don't expect Slack to share his biscuits. Dolly rang for the car, and soon the Daimler was rolling toward Much Benham, the morning air sharp with the scent of summer blooms. The police station, a dear brick building, hummed with activity, its corridors echoing with the clatter of typewriters and the murmur of constables. Inspector Slack, behind his cluttered desk, greeted them with a scowl tempered by weary resignation. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, tossing a report aside. "You're like flies at a picnic. What now?" "I've got Blake in a cell and Turner under scrutiny. Case is as good as closed." Miss Marple's smile was disarming, her voice gentle. "Not quite closed, Inspector. Miss Turner's scarf, Mr. Blake's taxi ride, these are compelling, but incomplete. Have you learned more about the scarf's origins, or Ruby's movements after the terrace sighting?" Slack leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "The scarf's a dead end for now. Ruby's perfume, Turner's prints on the cupboard, but she swears it's a setup. We're testing for other tracers, but it's slow. As for Ruby, the barman's sighting at 11:30 is our last fix. No one saw her leave the Majestic, yet she's in your library by 7, dead since midnight. I'm betting Blake moved her, taxi or not." Dolly's frown deepened, her mind racing. "But no tracers in his car, Inspector. And that taxi at 1 a.m. If Ruby died at midnight, how'd she get to our place so fast, with no tracks?" Slack's jaw tightened. "That's the hitch. I'm working on it. We've got a new lead, though came in this morning. A car in Vence Quarry, 5 miles from St. Mary Mead. Found a body inside, charred beyond recognition. Dental records are being checked, but it's female, young. Clothes match Ruby's, dance, costume pink, satin, sequins. Could be a second victim, or a mistake with Ruby's body." Dolly's heart lurched, her voice sharp. "A second body? Good heavens, Slack, what's going on?" Miss Marple's needles stilled, her gaze sharpening. "A burnt car, Inspector. In a quarry near Basil Blake's cottage. When was it found?" Slack flipped open his notebook. "Dawn today. A farmer spotted smoke, called it in. Fire's out, but the car's a wreck stolen from Danamouth, reported missing 2 days ago. Body's too burnt for a visual, but the costume's distinctive. We're waiting on the dentist, should know by noon." Dolly's eyes widened. "If it's not Ruby, then who? And why burn a body?" Miss Marple's tone was calm, but urgent. "May we see the quarry, Inspector? Its location, so close to the village, is no coincidence." Slack, grudgingly impressed by their persistence, agreed. "Fine, but don't touch anything. Meet me there in an hour. I've got to brief the coroner." They left the station, Dolly's mind a whirlwind. Jane, a second body. This changes everything. If it's not Ruby, who's in our library? And if it is, who's in the car? Miss Marple, adjusting her shawl, replied, "A question of identity." "Dolly, someone has gone to great lengths to confuse us. The quarry is a clue, and we must tread carefully. Vence Quarry, a jagged scar in the landscape, lay nestled between rolling hills, its gravel paths winding past heaps of slate and limestone. The burnt car, a blackened skeleton, sat cordoned off by police tape, its acrid stench lingering in the air. Slack was already there, conferring with a forensic officer, his face grim. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, waving them over. "Here's the mess. Cars are forward, stolen from Dannymouth. Bodies inside, on the passenger side. Costumes. A match for Ruby's pink satin, sequined, like she wore at the dance. But Ruby's in your library, so this is someone else." Dolly peered at the wreckage, her stomach churning. The car's interior was a charred ruin, the body a twisted shape beneath a tarp. "Any idea who she is?" she asked, her voice low. Slack shook his head. "Not yet. Dental records will tell us. Could be a runaway, a hotel worker, someone dressed to look like Ruby. The fire was deliberate petrol, set alight to hide the truth." Miss Marple, standing a few paces back, studied the quarry's edges, its proximity to Basil's cottage, barely a mile away, striking her as significant. "Inspector," she said, "have you searched the area for tracks or signs of a struggle?" Slack nodded, pointing to a constable sifting gravel. "We're looking. No footprints yet, but the ground's hard, and the fire covered a lot. Whoever did this knew the quarry locals, likely. Blake's cottage is close, which doesn't help his case." Dolly's eyes narrowed. "Basil again, but he's locked up. And if this girl died the same night, he couldn't be in two places." Miss Marple's voice was thoughtful. "Unless, Dolly, the bodies are linked by a single plan. 2 deaths, 1 night, 1 purpose. We must know who this second girl is." They returned to the Daimler, the quarry's grim scene etched in their minds. "Jane," Dolly said, "this is monstrous. 2 girls, 1 dressed as Ruby, burnt too." "Hide her face. It's no accident." Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. "No accident, indeed. A substitution, I suspect, to muddy the waters. Ruby's death was the goal, but this second girl, she's the key to the why. We must go to the Majestic, Dolly, and press Conway's circle harder. Their motives, greed, fear, jealousy, at the heart of this, at the Majestic Hotel." The afternoon sun bathed the terrace in light, but the mood was somber. Guests whispered of the quarry discovery, their voices hushed with dread. Mr. Prescott, meeting them in the lobby, was near collapse, his walrus moustache trembling. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, "this second body, it's the end of us. The police are everywhere. Guests are leaving. Mr. Jefferson's in the lounge, with Mrs. Jefferson. Mr. Gaskell's at the bar, as usual. Miss Turner's still with the police, but they've let her back for now." Dolly's heart quickened. "Josie's here. Good. We need to see them all." In the lounge, Conway Jefferson sat by a window, his wheelchair dwarfed by the room's grandeur. Adelaide Jefferson, her fair hair pinned neatly, read a letter, her face pale. Conway's eyes lit at their arrival, though his smile was strained. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you've heard about this quarry horror. Another girl did dits beyond belief. Have you news?" Dolly, settling beside him, chose her words carefully. "We've just come from the quarry, Mr. Jefferson. The body's burnt, but the clothes match Ruby's dance costume, we think. It's linked to her death. Did Ruby ever mention another girl? Perhaps a friend from the hotel?" Conway's brow furrowed, his hands gripping his rug. "Another girl? No. Ruby spoke only of Josie, her cousin. She was sociable, but her friends were casual dancers, waiters. If she knew this girl, she never said." Adelaide, folding her letter, spoke softly. Ruby was private, in her way. She'd chat with anyone but close friends. Only Josie. As far as I knew, this new death, it's chilling. Could it be a mistake? Miss Marple's needles clicked, her tone gentle. Not a mistake, Mrs. Jefferson. Someone meant to hide this girl's identity. Did you notice anyone at the hotel? Resembling ruby blonde young, perhaps a dancer? Adelaide shook her head, her eyes troubled. No one stands out. The hotel's full of young women maids, performers, but none like Ruby. She was distinctive. Their talk was interrupted by Mark Gaskell's arrival, his whiskey glass in hand, his charming smile absent. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, sinking into a chair. "You're at it again. This quarry business is ghastly. Sounds like someone's cleaning house, covering tracks." "Any bets on who?" Dolly's eyes narrowed. "You seem calm, Mr. Gaskell. This second girl, any guesses who she might be?" Mark shrugged, his gaze sharp. Not a clue. Could be anyone, a runaway, a hotel girl. Ruby had a knack for drawing people in, maybe too many. If someone's burning bodies, they're desperate. Blake's in jail, so it's not him. Maybe check Josie, she's been dodging questions like a pro. Adelaide's voice was sharp. "Mark, stop it. Josie's suffered. Enough. Let's not invent conspiracies." Miss Marple's gaze settled on Mark, her voice mild. "Mr. Gaskell, your debts, how pressing were they? Ruby's place in Mr. Jefferson's plans threatened your future, did it not?" Mark's smile tightened, his fingers drumming on his glass. "Threatened? Sure, it stung. Conway's money keeps me afloat, and Ruby was set to take a chunk. But I didn't kill her, or this other girl. I was here, drinking, till 1. Ask the barman." Conway's voice was weary. "Enough, Mark. These ladies are helping, and I won't have you sniping. Ruby's death, and now this, it's tearing me apart." Josie Turner entered then, her navy dress creased, her face pale but composed. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her eyes. "I'm free, for now. The police are still on about that scarf, but I've told them it's not mine, and I didn't hide it." Dolly seized the moment. "Josie, this new body in the quarry dressed like Ruby, did she ever mention a friend, someone who might pass for her?" Josie's hands clenched, her gaze flickering. "A friend? No. Ruby was close to me, mostly. She knew other dancers, but no one special. If this girl was dressed like her, it's wrong, twisted." Miss Marple's tone was gentle, probing. "Miss Turner, Ruby was nervous that last night, felt watched. Did she ever hint at a double, someone mimicking her?" Josie's lips parted, then closed. "Mimicking, no. She was jumpy, yes. Said she felt eyes on her, but she thought it was the pressure Conway's offer, the dance. I told her to rest. I wish I'd listened." Her voice broke, and Miss Marple saw a flash of guilt, raw and unguarded. As they left, the majestic Dolly's mind raced. Jane, 2 girls, one dressed as Ruby, burnt to hide her face. It's a plot, isn't it? To confuse us, to protect the killer. Miss Marple nodded, her shawl slipping slightly. A plot, yes, and a desperate one. The second body is no coincidence. It's a mirror reflecting Ruby's death. We must wait for the dental records, but I suspect a deception. Dolly, the library, the quarry, the scarf there, all part of a design, and Conway's wealth is its heart. They drove back to Gossington Hall, the dusk settling, the cases, shadows lengthening. Miss Marple's mind, as sharp as her needles, wove the new thread, the charred body, the pink satin into the tapestry. Knowing the truth was close, its edges fraying under the weight of a second death. Chapter 11. The web tightens. The morning mist clung to the fields of St. Mary Mead, softening the edges of Gossington Hall as the sun struggled to break through. Inside, the atmosphere was taut, the discovery of a second body in Ven's quarry adding a grim layer to the mystery of Ruby Keane's murder. Dolly Bantry, stirring her tea in the morning room, was a bundle of nerves, her mind racing over the charred remains dressed in Ruby's costume, Basil Blake's arrest, and Josie Turner's precarious position. Colonel Bantry, polishing his golf clubs with distracted vigor, muttered about the press's latest headlines and Inspector Slack's relentless pursuit of suspects. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the hearth with her knitting, was a quiet beacon, her pale blue eyes weaving a pattern from the case's tangled threads. Conway, Jefferson's wealth, Mark Gaskell's debts, Josie's loyalty, and the sinister mirror of a second death. The web was tightening, and she sensed the truth was near, its strands trembling under scrutiny. "Dolly," Miss Marple said, her needles pausing, "the quarry's body changes everything. 2 girls, one staged as Ruby, suggest a deliberate deception, a plan to obscure the truth. We must learn the second girl's identity, but equally, we must unravel the purpose behind Ruby's placement in your library. I propose we start with Inspector Slack for the dental records, then return to the Majestic to press Conway's circle further. Josie's scarf, Mark's insinuations, Adelaide's reticence, they all point to a motive rooted in fear or greed." Dolly set down her spoon, her eyes alight with resolve. "You're right, Jane. That burnt body, someone's playing a deadly game, and our home's the board. Let's see Slack, then tackle the hotel. Arthur, you'll manage the vultures outside." Colonel Bantry grunted, brandishing a club like a weapon. "Vultures, I'm ready to take a swing at them. Go, but don't let Slack steamroll you." Dolly rang for the car, and soon the Daimler was cutting through. The mist toward Much Benham, the air sharp with the promise of revelation. The police station was a hive of activity, its corridors filled with the clatter of phones and the murmur of constables. Inspector Slack, behind his paper-strewn desk, looked up with a scowl that softened into grudging respect. Miss Marple," he said, tossing a file aside, "you're relentless. I suppose you're here about the quarry body. Well, we've got news, and it's a shocker." Miss Marple's smile was mild, her voice steady. "News, Inspector? The dental records, perhaps?" Slack nodded, pulling a report from the pile. "Got them an hour ago. The body in the car, it's Pamela Reeves, a 16-year-old girl guide from Dannymoth. Vanished the same night as Ruby, reported missing by her parents. The costume's a match for Ruby's dance outfit, but Pamela's no dancer. She was a schoolgirl, quiet, no connection to the Majestic. The fire was set to hide her identity, but the teeth gave her away." Dolly's heart lurched, her voice sharp. "A schoolgirl, good heavens, Slack, why dress her as Ruby and burn her? What's the link?" Slack leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "That's the question. Pamela was last seen at a guide meeting, 6 p.m., walking home. Her parents thought she was staying with a friend, didn't realize she was gone till morning. The car stolen from Danny Mathrow's torched with petrol, deliberate. My guess someone killed Ruby, then Pamela, and staged the quarry scene to throw us off. Blake's still my man, his cottage is a mile from the quarry, and he was at your gates that night." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her tone thoughtful. "A compelling theory, Inspector, but the purpose eludes me. Why Pamela, and why your library, Mrs. Bantry? Have you searched the quarry for other clues? Slack flipped open his notebook. We're combing it now. Found a button, cheap. Near the car could be Pamela's, could be nothing. No tracks, no witnesses, but the quarry's, a local spot, known to anyone in St. Mary Mead. Blake's not talking, and Turner's sticking to her story about the scarf being planted. I'm keeping them both locked up till we crack this. Dolly's frown deepened. But Pamela's death, could it be unrelated? A coincidence? Slack snorted. Two girls, one night, one dressed as the other. No chance, it's a single. Killer, and I'll prove it. Miss Marple's gaze was distant, her mind turning over the new piece. Inspector, might we visit the quarry again? Its proximity to Basil's cottage, and now Pamela's presence, suggests a design we've yet to grasp. Slack, though exasperated, agreed. Fine, but stay out of the way. Meet me there in 2 hours. Meet me there in 2 hours. V super. They left the station, Dolly's thoughts a whirlwind. Jane, a girl guide, burnt in Ruby's clothes. It's monstrous. What's the connection? And why our library? Miss Marple, adjusting her shawl, replied, a connection of intent. Dolly, Pamela's death is no accident. Tits, a mirror reflecting Ruby's. The library was chosen to point us somewhere or away from something. We must look closer. Ven's quarry was a stark contrast to the morning's mist, its gravel paths gleaming under a now clear sky. The burnt car, cordoned off, was a blackened relic, its grim cargo removed to the morgue. Slack, already there, waved them over, his face set. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, nothing new yet. The buttons being tested likely from Pamela's coat, but it's common, no help. The car's a dead end, no prints. Whoever did this was careful. Dolly peered at the wreckage, her stomach tightening. Careful, yes, but desperate. Pamela was 16, Jane a child. Why her? Miss Marple, standing by the quarries edge, studied its layout, noting its nearness to Basil's cottage and the road to Gossington Hall. Why, indeed, she murmured. A substitute, perhaps, or a witness. Pamela saw something, or was made to play a part. Back in the Daimler, Dolly's voice was urgent. Jane, it's a plan, isn't it? Ruby killed, Pamela dressed as her, burnt to confuse us. But who? Benefits, Conway's money, Mark's debts, Josie's loyalty. They're all tied to Ruby, not Pamela. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking. A plan, yes, and a cunning one. Pamela's death is the key. It unlocks the why of Ruby's. We must go to the Majestic, Dolly, and press harder. The truth lies in Conway's circle, and the library's role is its shadow. At the Majestic Hotel, the afternoon buzz was subdued. Guests whispering of the quarry's horror. Mr. Prescott, meeting them in the lobby, was a wreck, his walrus mustache quivering. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, this second Gurlitz. The end of the Majestic. The police are relentless, and Miss Turner's back, but under watch. Mr. Jefferson's in the conservatory, with Mrs. Jefferson. Mr. Gaskell's at the bar, drowning his sorrows. Dolly's heart quickened. Josie's here, good. We need to see them all, Mr. Prescott. In the conservatory, Conway Jefferson sat amid ferns and orchids, his wheelchair a stark contrast to the lush greenery. Adelaide Jefferson, her fair hair pinned neatly, was reading, her face pale but composed. Conway's eyes lit at their arrival, though his smile was weary. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you're a lifeline in this storm. This quarry girl, Pamela Reeves, they say. It's unthinkable. Have you learned anything? Dolly, settling beside him, chose her words with care. We've just come from the quarry, Mr. Jefferson. Pamela was dressed as Ruby, burnt in a stolen car. We think it's linked to Ruby's death, perhaps to hide something. Did Ruby ever mention a young girl, perhaps a fan or a friend? Brow furrowed, his hands gripping his rug. A young girl, no. Ruby spoke of her dancing, her dreams never of anyone like that. She was focused, driven. If she knew this Pamela, she kept it quiet. Adelaide, closing her book, spoke softly. Ruby was friendly with the staff, but a schoolgirl, I can't imagine it. This new death, it's like a nightmare, spiraling out of control. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her tone gentle. Mrs. Jefferson, did you ever notice Ruby with someone unexpected, perhaps a girl who looked like her or followed her? Adelaide shook her head, her eyes troubled. No one liked that. Ruby stood out blonde, vibrant. The other dancers were different, darker or older. If this girl was made to look like her, it's cruel. Their talk was interrupted by Mark. Gaskell's arrival, his whiskey glass in hand, his charming smile replaced by a scowl. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, he said, slumping into a chair. You're like bloodhounds. This quarry mess another girl, dressed as Ruby. Someone's having a laugh, and it's not funny. Dolly's eyes narrowed. You're quick to jest, Mr. Gaskell. Any idea who this girl might be, or why she was staged like Ruby? Mark took a sip, his gaze sharp. Not a clue. Could be a nobody. Some kid caught in the wrong place. Ruby was trouble. Stirred up all sorts jealousy, greed. Maybe this Pamela saw something, got in the way. Josie Norraby told her everything. Adelaide's voice was sharp. Mark, stop pointing fingers. Josie's been through enough. Let's not make this worse. Miss Marple's gaze settled on Mark, her voice mild. Mr. Gaskell, your debts pressed heavily, did they not? Ruby's adoption threatened your share of Mr. Jefferson's fortune. How far would you go to protect it? Mark's smile tightened, his fingers drumming on his glass. Far, not that far, Miss Marple. I'm a gambler, not a killer. Ruby was a nuisance, sure, but I didn't torch cars or strangle girls. I was here, drinking, till 1. Check with Prescott. Conway's voice was weary. Enough, Mark. These ladies are trying to help. Ruby's gone, and now this poor child, it's tearing me apart. Josie Turner entered, her navy dress creased, her face pale but resolute. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, she said, her voice steady despite the strain in her eyes. I'm free, but the police are watching me. That scarf, it's a lie, planted to trap me. And this new girl, I never heard of Pamela Reeves. Dolly seized the moment. Josie, Pamela, was dressed as Ruby, burnt in a car. Did Ruby ever mention a double, someone who might pass for her? Josie's hands clenched, her gaze flickering. A double. No, Ruby was unique, her look, her spark. She'd laugh at the idea. That last night she was scared, said she felt watched, but she wouldn't name anyone. I thought it was nerves. Miss Marple's tone was probing, yet kind. Miss Turner, Ruby's fear, was it tied to Mr. Jefferson's plans, or something else? A secret, perhaps, about the bracelet. Josie's lips parted, then closed. The bracelet, I don't know. She kept things from me, small things. But they added up. If she had a secret, she took it with her. Her voice trembled, and Miss Marple saw a flicker of truth. Buried deep. Their talk was cut short by Prescott's arrival, his face ashen. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, the police have new evidence. Witness, a quarry worker, saw a car near Basil's cottage that night, not Blake's. Dark sedan, no plates. Slack's chasing it now." Dolly's heart raced. Not Basil's car. Then who? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her voice calm. Who, indeed? The web tightens, Dolly, but the spider is still hidden. We must think, and watch, and wait. As they left the Majestic, Dolly's mind whirled. Jane, Pamela's death, the sedan, the library, it's all one plan, isn't it? To protect someone or hide something. Miss Marple nodded, her shawl slipping slightly. A plan, yes, and a desperate one. Pamela was no random victim, she was part of the deception, a shadow cast to obscure Ruby's killer. The library, the quarry, the scarf there, all threads, and Conway's world is their loom. They drove back to Gossington Hall, the dusk deepening, the case's web closing in. Miss Marple's mind, as keen as her needles, wove the new strands. Pamela's teeth, the sedan's shadow. Josie's flicker of truth, knowing the spider was near, its trap about to spring. Chapter 12. The final revelation. The morning light spilled through the windows of Gossington Hall, casting a warm glow over the morning room, where the air was thick with anticipation. Dolly Bantry, clutching her coffee cup, was a bundle of nervous energy, her mind racing over the grim discovery of Pamela Reeves's charred body in Vent's quarry and the tightening web of suspects around Ruby Keane's murder. Colonel Bantry, leafing through a golfing magazine, grumbled about the presses. Relentless siege and Inspector Slack's dogged pursuit of Basil, Blake, and Josie Turner. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the hearth with her knitting, was a quiet anchor, her pale blue eyes weaving the case's final threads. Conway Jefferson's wealth, Mark Gaskell's debts, Josie's guarded loyalty, and the sinister deception of a second death. The truth, she knew, was at hand, its pattern clear at last, ready to be laid bare. "Dolly," Miss Marple said, her needles pausing, "the quarry's tragedy has illuminated the design. Ruby's death, Pamela's staged demise, the library's role, they are parts of a single, cunning plan. We must go to the Majestic today, confront Conway's circle, and reveal the truth. Josie's scarf, Mark's evasions, the dark sedan, they all point to a motive rooted in greed and betrayal. I propose we invite Inspector Slack to join us, for the denouement requires his authority." Dolly set down her cup, her eyes blazing with resolve. "You've cracked it, haven't you, Jane? I can feel it. Let's end this call, Slack. Gather them all at the hotel. Arthur, you'll hold the fort." Colonel Bantry tossed his magazine aside, his mustache twitching. "Fort? It's a battlefield out there. Go, but don't let Slack take the credit for your brains, Jane." Dolly telephoned the police station, securing Slack's reluctant agreement to meet at the Majestic that afternoon, then rang for the car. The Daimler soon hummed toward Danamoth, the sea a restless shimmer under a June sky, the weight of the case pressing like a storm about to break. The Majestic Hotel, when they arrived, stood resplendent but subdued, its lobby hushed with the scandal's fallout. Mr. Prescott, the manager, greeted them with a weary bow, his walrus mustache drooping, lower than ever. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, "you're tireless. The police are here. Miss Turner's under watch. Mr. Jefferson's in the lounge with his family. This quarry horror has us all on edge." Miss Marple's smile was calm, her voice steady. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Please arrange for Mr. Jefferson, Mrs. Jefferson, Mr. Gaskell, and Miss Turner to join us in the lounge and ensure Inspector Slack is shown in when he arrives. We have matters to resolve." Prescott, sensing the gravity in her tone, nodded and hurried off. Dolly whispered, "Jane, you're like a general marshalling troops. What's the plan?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her needles clicking softly. "The plan, Dolly, is truth. The killer has woven a web of lies, but it's fraying. We must pull the final thread." The lounge was a grand room, its chandeliers glinting, its windows framing the sea. Conway Jefferson sat in his wheelchair by a fireplace, his lined face, weary but alert. Adelaide Jefferson, her fair hair pinned neatly, sat beside him, her dove-grey dress a study in restraint. Mark Gaskell lounged by a window, a whiskey glass in hand, his charming smile strained. Josie Turner stood near the door, her navy dress creased, her dark hair slipping from its pins, her eyes wary but defiant. The Bantrys took seats opposite Conway, Miss Marple settling beside Dolly, her knitting bag at her feet. Inspector Slack arrived moments later, his lean face set in a scowl, a constable trailing behind. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, nodding curtly, "this better be good. I've got Blake in a cell and Turner on a short leash." Miss Marple's voice was clear, cutting through the room's tension. "Inspector, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering. Ruby Keane's murder, and now Pamela Reeves's death, have cast a shadow over us all. But the truth is clear, and it begins with a plan, a cruel, calculated scheme driven by greed and fear. Let me lay it out, step by step." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, noting Conway's frown, Adelaide's stillness, Mark's restless fingers, Josie's clenched hands. Dolly held her breath, sensing the climax of their long quest. "Ruby Keane," Miss Marple began, "was not Ruby Keane. The girl we knew as Ruby, found strangled in the Bantrys Library, was an impostor, a dancer hired to play a part. The real Ruby was Pamela Reeves, a 16-year-old girl guide, lured to the Majestic under a false identity. Pamela, young and impressionable, was recruited by Josie Turner, who needed a dancer to captivate Conway Jefferson and secure his fortune. Josie, posing as Ruby's cousin, orchestrated this deception, coaching Pamela to mimic a seasoned performer, to charm Conway with her youth and ambition. Conway, grieving his lost daughter, was an easy mark. His plan to adopt Ruby, a windfall Josie intended to control. Conway's face paled, his hands gripping his rug. "Pamela, not Ruby. That's impossible." Ruby was real, vibrant. Josie's voice was sharp, her eyes flashing. "This is nonsense. Ruby was my cousin, my family. I'd never miss." Marple raised a hand, her tone unwavering. "Please, Miss Turner, let me continue. Pamela, as Ruby, played her role well, but she grew suspicious. She overheard Josie's plans, perhaps saw her with Mark Gaskell, Josie's secret lover. Pamela threatened to expose the truth, and so she had to die. Josie and Mark killed her, strangling her in the Majestic service quarters, then staged her body in the Bantrys Library to deflect suspicion." Dolly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Our library, why?" Miss Marple's eyes were steady. "To point to Basil Blake, Dolly. Basil, with his cottage near Gossington Hall, was the perfect scapegoat. Josie knew of his friendship with the real Ruby, a dancer we'll call Vera, for clarity, and used it to frame him. Vera, a runaway with a passing resemblance to Pamela, was lured to Dannemouth by Josie, promised work at the Majestic. Instead, she became the second victim, killed to complete the deception. Her body, dressed in Pamela's dance costume, was burnt in the quarry to suggest Ruby's death was a mistake. A random act, while Pamela's body, as Ruby, was placed in your library to seal Basil's guilt. Slack's scowl deepened, his notebook open. 2 girls, swapped identities. That's a tall tale, Miss Marple. Where's the proof? Miss Marple's voice was calm, her needles resuming their rhythm. The proof, Inspector, is in the details. The sapphire bracelet found in Ruby's room was a gift from Mark to Josie, meant to bind her to their plan, but left behind when Pamela grew wary. Josie's scarf, with Ruby's perfume, was planted in the cupboard by Josie herself, to muddy the waters when suspicion fell on her. The dark sedan, seen near Basil's cottage, was Mark's car, used to transport Vera's body to the quarry, and Basil's taxi ride at 1A.M. He was lured there by a call from Josie, posing as Ruby, to place him at the scene. Mark's glass clattered to the table, his face ashen. This is absurd. I'm no killer. I was in the lounge, drinking, till 1. Prescott saw me. Josie's voice was shrill, her hands trembling. You're mad. I loved Ruby Pamela. Whoever she was, I'd never hurt her. Adelaide's eyes widened, her voice low. Conway, is this possible? Could we have been so blind? Conway's face was a mask of pain, his voice hollow. Josie, Mark, say it's not true. Miss Marple's gaze was unrelenting, her tone measured. It is true, Mr. Jefferson. Josie's motive was greed. She saw your wealth as her future. But Ruby, or rather Pamela, threatened it. Mark, drowning in debts, joined her, desperate to preserve his share of your fortune. They killed Pamela to silence her, then Vera to confuse the trail. The library was chosen to implicate Basil, whose friendship with Vera made him vulnerable. But their plan faltered. Pamela's dental records betrayed the quarry body, and Josie's scarf, meant as a red herring, pointed back to her. Their lies, like a poorly knitted scarf, have unraveled. Slack, his skepticism waning, leaned forward. And the terrace sighting. The barman saw Ruby Pamela with a man at 11:30. Was that Gaskell? Miss Marple nodded. Yes, Inspector. Mark met Pamela briefly, ensuring she'd stay in the ballroom till midnight, when Josie lured her to the service quarters. The strangling was swift. The body moved to a waiting car-marked sedan, then driven to Gossington Hall. Basil's arrival at 1, orchestrated by Josie's call, was the final touch, but he was innocent, a pawn in their game. Josie lunged forward, her face contorted, her voice a scream. You old witch. You've no proof, just stories. She aimed for Miss Marple, but Slack was faster, his hand clamping her arm, the constable moving to restrain her. Mark, his bravado gone, slumped in his chair, his voice a whisper. It's over, Josie. They know. He turned to Slack, tears in his eyes. It was her idea, Josie's. She planned it, said we'd be rich. Pamela was going to tell Conway, ruin everything. We had no choice. Vera, she was just there. A loose end. I didn't want to, but Josie pushed me. The room froze, the confession a thunderclap. Conway's face crumpled, his hands shaking. Josie, Mark, my family. How could you? Adelaide, tears streaming, reached for him, her voice broken. Conway, I'm so sorry, I didn't see. Dolly, gripping Miss Marple's arm, whispered, Jane, you did it. You saw through it all. Slack, his notebook forgotten, barked. Orders to the constable, cuff them both. Turner Gaskell, you're under arrest for the murders of Pamela Reeves and Vera Bennet. As Josie was led away, her screams echoing, Mark followed, head bowed. The weight of his betrayal crushing him. The lounge emptied, leaving only the Bantrys, Miss Marple, and Conway, the silence heavy with grief. Conway's voice was barely audible, his eyes distant. "Miss Marple, how did you know? I loved Ruby, Pamela, whoever she was." Miss Marple's tone was gentle, her knitting bag at her feet. "I knew, Mr. Jefferson, because human nature is my study. Greed, fear, love, they leave traces like stitches in a tapestry. Pamela's youth, Vera's resemblance, your kindness, they were twisted into a plot, but the truth always shows through." Dolly, wiping her skirt, added, "And our library, Jane Wyas, just to frame Basil." Miss Marple nodded, her shawl slipping slightly. Yes, Dolly Gossington Hall was a stage. Its library a spotlight to cast suspicion on Basil. Josie knew his link to Vera, his proximity to you. It was a cruel choice, but effective until we looked closer. Conway, his strength fading, murmured, "I trusted them." "What's left now?" Miss Marple's eyes were kind. "Truth, Mr. Jefferson, and time. You'll heal, as St. Mary Mead will. Evil passes, but good endures." As they left the Majestic, Dolly leaned on Colonel Bantry's arm, who'd joined them at Slack's summons, her voice awed. "Jane, it was monstrous, 2 girls, swapped, killed, all for money. How did you see it?" Miss Marple smiled, adjusting her hat against the sea breeze. "I saw the heart, Dolly, the human heart, with its darkness and light, malice, fear, Vera's innocence, Josie's ambition. They told a story, and I listened. The library was their stage, but truth was the script." They climbed into the Daimler, the sea fading behind, the village ahead, its quiet lanes restored. Miss Marple's mind, as sharp as her needles, held the final imager web of lies. Its spider caught, its victims freed to rest.